I tried everything, and it still wasn't enough. You did everything they told you to do, didn't you? You read the books, watched the videos, made the vision boards, went to therapy, started journaling, cut off the toxic people, drank more water, moved your body, healed your inner child. And somehow you still go to bed at night with that same quiet thought. If I tried this hard and it still isn't working, what does that say about me? It hits you in the small, ordinary moments, lying awake in the dark, replaying that one conversation, wondering if you sounded needy, if you said too much, if you were too quiet. Scrolling through social media, seeing people your age get engaged, move in together, start families, while you are still trying to fix the same patterns. You close the app, but the comparison stays. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like you're the only one who still hasn't figured out how to be chosen does. There were milestones that were supposed to finally fix it, right? The new job, the weight loss, the glow up after the breakup. You told yourself, once I do this, then I'll feel worthy. Then love will stay. But the promotion came and the silence after it felt louder. The compliments faded and the old ache returned. The hardest part is not that you failed, it's that you did not fail. You did everything right, and the emptiness still did not move. Self-improvement was supposed to save you. Instead, it quietly became another grading system. Another way to measure your worth. Another chart where you are always behind. Miss a day at the gym, skip a morning routine, struggle to self-regulate your attachment, and suddenly it's not just about one choice. It becomes proof in your mind that you are still the problem, that you're too broken, too late, too much, or somehow still not enough. What scares me most is how long you've carried this alone. How long you believed that if you could just try harder, heal faster, be calmer, be less sensitive, then love would finally stay. But what if the problem was never that you weren't trying hard enough? What if you were never meant to earn love in the first place? What if this exhaustion is not a sign that you're failing? It just means your heart is tired of living like a project instead of a person? In this series, I don't want to give you hacks or quick motivation. There's nothing wrong with goals, but this is going to be slower, more honest, more intimate. We're going to look at where this belief started, how it still shows up in your relationships, your work, your nights alone, and how to gently, very gently, redefine what enough even means. I can't promise you'll be fixed by the end. That doesn't make you hopeless. It just means we're telling the truth. My hope is that you might see yourself with softer eyes. And to do that, we have to go back to where this really began. Long before productivity, grades, or dating apps. Back to the first small, almost invisible ways love started to feel conditional. When self-improvement becomes self-punishment, back then it was small things. Gold stars, good grades, being the quiet one who never caused trouble. You start learning that love arrives faster when you're impressive and disappears when you're simply yourself. It doesn't feel like a lesson at the time, it just feels like the way the world works. So you grow up and the gold stars turn into routines. New morning rituals, new planners, new skincare, new workout apps. Every fresh start feels like a promise. This will be the version of you that finally feels calm, finally feels chosen, finally doesn't feel so lonely at night. You line up your habits like dominoes and wait for the magic. But when the emptiness is still there in the silence, you quietly blame yourself instead of the promise. It's not just about waking up earlier or drinking more water. It becomes a whole cycle of trying to fix what you've decided is wrong with you. New books, new podcasts, new affirmations on sticky notes. For a week or two, you feel a soft rush of hope. Maybe this author, this method, this challenge will be the thing. And when it fades, when you forget, when you're too tired to keep up, you don't just feel disappointed in the habit. You feel disappointed in you. The hardest part is how every attempt that doesn't stick turns into evidence against you. You read the reviews. This changed my life. I finally love myself. My anxiety's gone. You look at your own life and think, if this worked for everyone else and not for me, maybe I really am broken. The tool doesn't fail you, you fail the tool. At least that's what the voice in your head says. And listen to that voice for a second. Does it sound kind? Or does it sound like pressure, urgency, quiet disgust? It tells you to heal, but it sounds like, hurry up, you're falling behind. It tells you to grow, but it sounds like, who you are right now is not acceptable. Self-improvement becomes self-punishment dressed up as discipline. You call it growth, but what scares me most is how much of it is actually fear. Fear of being alone forever. Fear of never being chosen. Fear that if you stop optimizing for 1 second, the fragile love you've earned will disappear. And the world around you agrees. Success culture keeps whispering that you are a project, a brand, a work in progress that must always be upgraded. There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn or take care of yourself. That doesn't make you shallow. It just means the water you're swimming in is always asking, how can you be more? And almost never, how do you feel? So you wake up already feeling behind. You measure your worth in steps walked, emails sent, pages read. Rest feels wrong unless you can rename it recovery in a training plan. You call it discipline when you ignore your hurt, resilience when you push past your own limits, devotion when you abandon your needs to keep someone else from leaving. But underneath every habit is a quiet bargain. If I can finally become good enough, maybe then I'll be loved, safe, and chosen. As long as you haven't reached that imaginary version of yourself, you treat your heart like a problem to solve, a glitch to debug, a mess to hide, until it's presentable. And if nothing ever feels like enough, maybe the issue isn't your effort or your discipline at all. What if the reason every fix falls flat is simpler and scarier? You were never meant to live your whole life relating to yourself as something wrong. What if your heart was never meant to be treated like a project in the first place? The invisible contract. I'll be perfect if you'll stay. If your heart was never meant to be a project, then why does love still feel like a performance review? Why does every quiet night turn into a mental spreadsheet of what you did right, what you did wrong, and whether it will finally be enough to keep someone from leaving? Most of us never sat down and decided this. No one handed you a contract and said, sign here, be perfect, and you might be chosen. Instead, it was the small, repeated moments. The way your parents' face tightened when you cried too loudly. The way the room went colder when you were too much. The way praise showed up only when you brought home good grades or stayed quiet or made things easier for everyone else. You start making unspoken deals long before you have words for them. If I don't cause problems, maybe they won't snap. If I get everything right, maybe they'll be proud. If I never need too much, maybe they won't leave. It's not just about wanting approval, it's about survival. Your nervous system is learning, in real time, what is safe. Smiles when you perform. Distance when you're messy. Attention when you achieve. Silence when you're simply yourself. The hardest part is, you don't realize you're signing anything. You just slowly adjust. A little less honest here, a little more impressive there. You become the overachiever who stacks trophies and degrees because success is the only language that ever seemed to move love closer. Or you become the peacemaker, smoothing every conflict, swallowing your own hurt so no one gets upset because disharmony feels dangerous. Or you become the quiet child, shrinking in the corner, learning that being invisible is safer than being real. That doesn't make you weak or dramatic. It just means your body did its job. It protected you the only way it knew how. What scares me most is how easily those childhood contracts follow you into adulthood without you ever noticing. Suddenly you're at work, staying late, over-delivering, terrified that one mistake will make you disposable. You're in friendships where you listen for hours but never share how lonely you feel, because needing back what you give feels selfish. In love, you keep auditioning. You glow up after every breakup, fix every flaw they hinted at, read every book, heal every wound they pointed to, and they still leave. Being alone doesn't hurt most. Being unchosen after you tried so hard does. Rest feels dangerous. Failure feels like abandonment. Being ordinary feels like a risk you can't afford. And as long as you haven't seen this for what it is, you keep blaming your reflection instead of the contract. You call it perfectionism, but it's not just about being organized or driven. It's about a scared child inside you who learned that love lives just out of reach, at the end of your next achievement. The roots of "I'm not enough" are usually here, in those subtle ways your earliest caregivers couldn't meet your emotional needs. They may have loved you, provided for you, even done their best, and still left parts of you alone in the dark. That's where attachment wounds begin to whisper, and where we need to look next. Attachment wounds. When love felt just out of reach, this is where it quietly starts. Not in some dramatic moment, but in the small, everyday ways you learned what love felt like, what safety felt like, and what you had to do to keep it. Before you had words like attachment or neglect, your body was already taking notes. When I cry, do they come? When I'm proud, do they look up? When I'm hurt, do they stay? Maybe they were there every night, the lights on, dinner on the table, homework checked. Not cruel, not absent, just far away. A parent on the couch, scrolling or exhausted. A caregiver who could pack your lunch and sign every form, but froze when you cried too hard. A home where your grades, your trophies, your good behavior got more attention than your quiet sadness. It's not just about what happened, it's also about what never did. The hardest part is how easy it is to grow up and think, nothing really bad happened, so why am I like this? You look back and see a roof, food, school, maybe even vacations. You tell yourself there's nothing wrong with how you were raised, other people had it worse, so you must be the problem. And in that story, you completely miss the loneliness of never feeling deeply seen, of going to bed at night with questions you never said out loud. As a child, you didn't look at your caregivers and think, they are emotionally limited. You thought, I must be too much, too needy, too dramatic, not worth the effort. When they went quiet, you learned to lower your voice. When they shut down, you learned to shut yourself down first. You start believing that the only way to keep love close is to make yourself smaller, easier, less. Over time, this turns into an internal rule. If I can just be better, calmer, smarter, prettier, more helpful, maybe then I'll finally be enough to be fully loved. It's not just about pleasing people, it's survival. You chase grades, productivity, glowing up after every heartbreak, hoping the next version of you will finally be the one that gets chosen and never left. And then you grow up. And those early rules don't disappear. They just change costumes. You might cling to emotionally unavailable people because their distance feels familiar. You might overfunction in relationships, always the one fixing, soothing, proving. You feel panic when someone pulls away or go numb when someone gets too close, because real availability feels almost wrong, like you're waiting for the catch. What scares me most is how many tender, sensitive people are still blaming themselves for patterns that started in rooms they couldn't leave. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your nervous system learned love is something you earn, not something you're allowed to rest in. None of this is your fault, and as long as you haven't gone completely numb, there is still hope. Understanding these attachment wounds is the first step in breaking the cycle of chasing conditional love everywhere you go. And in the next part, we'll start untangling what that looks like in the way you date, choose, and stay. Chasing conditional love, grades, gold stars, and good behavior. When you grow up around conditional love, it starts so quietly you almost miss it. It looks harmless, even sweet. A report card on the fridge, a gold star on a chart, a parent's face finally softening when you bring home an A, or when you don't make a fuss, or when you're the one who helps instead of cries. Not because they're cruel, but because they were taught the same thing. Worth is something you prove. You start getting names instead of questions. The responsible one, the smart one, the strong one. Titles that sound like compliments, but also sound like jobs. Did anyone ever just ask, "How do you feel?" without needing you to be impressive or useful or fine? The hardest part is realizing how rare that was. Realizing that even as a child, you were already auditioning. So you learned to read the room like your life depended on it. The way adults lit up when you succeeded. The way the air went heavy when you fell short. The way love felt warmer when you were impressive and cooler when you were simply human. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just remember the silence after a B, the tight smile when you cried, the quick distraction when you needed too much. Over time, you built an inner scoreboard. Every grade, every compliment, every chore done without being asked became a little deposit in your invisible worth account. For a moment, you could breathe. For a moment, you felt less wrong. But it never lasted, did it? The balance always felt low again. You start chasing the next task, the next achievement, because rest feels dangerous when love has always been tied to effort. And then you begin to self-police. You hide mistakes before anyone can see them. You over-explain so no one can think badly of you. You apologize 3 times for things that weren't even your fault, just in case. What scares me most is how normal that can start to feel. You're not living, you're managing perception, trying to stay one step ahead of criticism so you don't lose the love you worked so hard to earn. It's not just about school or childhood. This becomes your template for every room you walk into, every friend group, every job, every relationship. You start believing you have to bring something to the table to deserve a seat at it. Beauty, productivity, emotional labor. Being the one who listens at night, who holds everyone else together. There's nothing wrong with being capable or kind. That doesn't make you needy or dramatic. It just means you learned love as a transaction instead of a home. As you grow older, the currencies change, but the emptiness underneath stays the same. The grades turn into looks, status, performance at work, how healed you seem. You can glow up, level up, fix everything they said was wrong with you, and still feel strangely lonely inside your own life. And in the next part, we'll talk about how that same hunger for conditional love follows you into dating, and why doing more has never been the thing that finally makes someone stay. When your reflection becomes a report card. So when fixing yourself doesn't finally make you feel safe, the target quietly shifts to your body. One day it stops being just the thing that carries you through the world and starts feeling like an assignment. Do you remember when that happened for you? Maybe it was the first time you caught your reflection next to someone thinner, prettier, more put together, and felt something sink in your stomach. Or a comment from someone you trusted, meant as helpful, that landed like a grade. You start realizing the mirror isn't a mirror anymore. It's a report card. Every angle is an evaluation. Every photo is evidence. Media hands you examples of who gets to be loved, protected, chosen, and they all seem to look a certain way. The hardest part is, you don't remember agreeing to those rules. You just remember absorbing them. Quietly, repeatedly, until they felt like the truth. So your appearance becomes another performance. Outfits stop being about what feels like you, and start being about what might finally make someone stay. Makeup turns into armor instead of art. Workouts become less about caring for a tired body and more about punishing a wrong one. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel attractive. That doesn't make you shallow or vain. It just means, somewhere along the way, you learned that beauty is a kind of currency in a world that made you feel poor. What scares me most is how early that lesson starts. Before you even know what love really is, you're already learning what kind of body seems to get it. You notice who gets attention in the hallway, who gets asked out, who gets defended. You notice how different bodies are talked about at the dinner table, on the screen, in the silence after someone leaves the room. You're still a child, but you're already taking notes. From there, your days split. Good body days and bad body days. The number on the scale, the way your jeans fit, the lighting in a dressing room, they decide if you're allowed to be seen or if you should hide. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like you have to earn the right to be looked at without disgust does. As long as you haven't met anyone who can see past that grading system, you start believing it must be accurate. And underneath all of it is conditional love. If I look like this, I'm safe. If I don't, I'm replaceable. Every perceived flaw feels like a threat to your belonging, like proof that love will pass you over again. It's not just about vanity, it's about survival in a world that acts like beauty is a ticket to being chosen, protected, and valued. But if your body has always been a battlefield, how could you ever feel at home in yourself, no matter how hard you try to improve? Productivity as proof that you deserve to be here. If your body has always been a battlefield, your time usually becomes one too. You wake up already bracing for impact, like the day is something you have to win just to earn the right to be here. Before you even lift your head from the pillow, your hand reaches for your phone. Notifications, emails, messages. Proof that you matter. Proof that someone needs you. You start scrolling before your eyes are fully open, already behind on a race you never agreed to run. Not because you love being busy, but because the silence between tasks feels dangerous. While you brush your teeth, you're mentally listing everything you have to do, everything you should have done yesterday, everything that will make you feel a little less wrong. There's no neutral moment. Every second is either productive or wasted, and wasted feels the same as worthless. A typical day under this pressure is less like living and more like reporting. How many emails answered? How many steps walked? How many messages replied to? How many errands? How many tiny ways you can prove you're not lazy, not falling behind, not failing at life? You measure the day in output instead of moments. Did you laugh? Did you feel loved? You do not even remember, but you know you cleared your list. That has to count for something, right? The hardest part is that slowly you start to feel like you don't deserve to exist unless you're contributing something measurable. As long as you haven't done enough, you feel like too much. Sitting still on the couch in the middle of the afternoon feels almost indecent, like you're stealing time from someone more deserving. Rest is no longer a need. It's a debt you have not yet earned the right to pay. So rest becomes suspicious. If you relax, you feel lazy. If you say no, you feel selfish. If you slow down, you feel like you're falling behind everyone else whose highlight reels you scroll past at night. It's not just about work. Even your healing starts to feel like a project. You track habits, optimize routines, turn therapy into another place you're trying to get an A. What scares me most is how love gets tangled up in this. If you were praised for being responsible, helpful, high-achieving, then doing less doesn't just feel unproductive, it feels unsafe. That doesn't make you dramatic, it just means your nervous system learned that busyness is the price of being chosen. The way you keep people close, the way you avoid being alone with the parts of you that still hurt. And it's not just about career. You can turn hobbies into performances, friendships into obligations, even softness into something you're trying to perfect. Every corner of your life becomes a task. Because if you ever really stopped, if you put everything down and let the day be empty, what feelings might finally catch up to you? The comparison trap. Everyone else seems chosen. So you don't stop. You pick up your phone instead. And suddenly it's not just your own life you're running from. It's everyone else's life you're staring at. Late at night, in that thin silence where the room feels too big and you feel too small, you start scrolling. Perfectly lit kitchens, engagement photos under fairy lights, gym progress pictures, beach bodies, promotions, anniversaries, baby announcements. Their lives look sharp and finished. Yours feels blurry and unfinished. It's not just about the photos themselves. Your brain fills in everything you can't see. You don't just see a ring, you see a story where they were chosen easily, where someone looked at them and thought, "Of course you." You don't just see a new apartment, you see stability, safety, a future that seems to have a place for them. You don't just see their smile, you see proof that they are loved, wanted, secure in a way you still don't feel. What scares me most is how quickly you turn their moments into evidence against yourself. Their promotion becomes proof you're behind. Their relationship becomes proof you're unlovable. Their glow becomes proof you're plain. You start reading every caption like a quiet accusation. If they could do it, why haven't you? If they are chosen, what does it say that you are still alone at night, staring at a screen that keeps reminding you of everything you don't have? The hardest part is, comparison isn't just envy. It's grief. It's mourning the life you thought you'd have by now. The version of you that would be posting the anniversary trip, the "we moved in" photo, the soft Sunday morning with someone's arm around you. You feel the ache for the love that never arrived, the career that didn't unfold on schedule, the body you were promised would finally make you feel okay. You're not just jealous of them, you're grieving the you that never got to exist. And somewhere in that grief, a story forms. Everyone else must have gotten a manual you somehow missed. A way of being that makes them naturally enough without trying so hard. They seem to know how to move through rooms, how to be wanted, how to be picked. You watch them and think, there's nothing wrong with them, so there must still be something wrong with me. That doesn't make you dramatic, it just means you're trying to make sense of hurt with the only evidence you think you have. It's not just about social media either. Comparison shows up at work when your friend gets praised and you get overlooked. It shows up in your family when one sibling is the success story and you're the late bloomer. It shows up in friend groups and who gets invited first, who gets texted back fastest, who seems more secure while you feel like the extra. As long as you haven't noticed the pattern, you'll keep believing they're simply better and you're simply lacking. But if you only ever see yourself from the harshest angle and everyone else from their best, how could you ever feel like you measure up? The quiet panic of never measuring up. So you move through your day with this quiet, low-level panic humming underneath everything. On the surface, you're answering messages, going to work, showing up. But underneath, there's this constant sense that you're late to your own life, that you missed a door everyone else somehow walked through while you were looking down. It's not just about big moments. It's there when you open your email in the morning and see someone your age announcing a promotion, a move, an engagement. You stare at the screen a little too long, pretending you're just tired, but inside you hear, everyone else is moving forward. Why am I still here? What's wrong with me? It's there when you scroll at night and see baby photos, house keys, anniversary trips, and you start counting how far behind you must be. The hardest part is how ordinary it all looks from the outside. You look functional. Sometimes you even look successful. People might tell you they admire how put together you are. They have no idea that you go home and sit in the silence, feeling like an imposter waiting to be exposed. They don't see the way your chest tightens when someone says, "You're doing so well," and all you can think is, if only you knew. Your nervous system knows this story by heart. Tight chest, shoulders pulled up toward your ears, shallow breathing that never quite reaches your stomach. You lie down at night, exhausted, but your body won't fully rest. Your mind starts scanning. What did I forget? What did I do wrong? What should I already have achieved by now? Rest starts to feel dangerous, like if you stop for 1 second, you'll fall even further behind. And it's not just about goals, it's about identity. When you believe you are fundamentally behind, every small mistake feels like proof. You send an awkward text, stumble over your words, miss a deadline, and it doesn't stay a simple moment. It becomes a verdict. See? This is why no one chooses you. This is why love keeps passing you by. A typo in an email turns into a whole story about why you'll always be second choice. What scares me most is how alone this can make you feel. Because there's nothing wrong with your longing to be loved, to be chosen, to feel like you're finally enough. That doesn't make you needy or dramatic. It just means you spent years in rooms where love felt conditional, where being praised for performance mattered more than being held when you were hurt. Comparison and pressure taught your body that safety lives in perfection, not in being human. So of course your system reacts this way. Of course you feel like you're always on trial. This isn't a personal failure, it's a predictable response to a world that graded your worth. But the more you try to fix it by doing more, proving more, improving more, the more trapped you feel. Maybe the way out isn't in running faster. Maybe it's in quietly questioning the rules you were given about what makes you enough in the first place. When healing becomes another thing, you're failing at maybe. That's why you threw yourself into healing the same way you used to throw yourself into proving. New rules, same pressure. You traded grades and achievements for journaling prompts and meditation streaks. You started collecting tools the way you used to collect gold stars. You read the books. You highlighted every page. You sat in therapy week after week, saying the hard things out loud. You did the morning routines, the night routines, the breath work, the shadow work. You tried to sit with your inner child, talk to your attachment wounds, rewrite the story. And yet, on some random night, one text can still undo you. One hint of distance and your chest is tight again. Your mind racing, your heart convinced you're about to be left. You feel like, after all this work, why am I still like this? The hardest part is how quickly that turns into shame. Not just, I'm hurt, but I'm failing at healing. You start thinking, if I've done all the things they say to do and I still get triggered, maybe I'm unfixable. Maybe I'm the exception healing doesn't work for. It's not just about feeling pain. It's the story that your pain is proof you're doing something wrong. What scares me most is how the place that was supposed to be soft starts to feel like another exam. Healing becomes another test you have to pass before you deserve love. Every reaction is graded. Every bad day feels like you've gone backwards. There's no room to just be human because you're busy auditing every thought, every attachment, every lonely night in case it means you're not there yet. And then there's the healing you see online. Before and after stories. Perfect glow-ups. People talking about their one breakthrough session where everything changed. They used to chase the wrong people. Now they only choose secure love. They used to feel lonely at night. Now they fall asleep in safe arms. You look at your own slow, messy process and think, what's wrong with me? That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you're comparing your insides to someone else's edited ending. The truth is, it's not just about the tools you use, it's about the secret expectation underneath them. If you quietly believe that healing would finally make you enough, then every lingering insecurity feels like failure. As long as you haven't erased every anxious thought, you decide you're still not worthy, still not ready to be chosen. But there's nothing wrong with still feeling scared sometimes. Healing was never about becoming flawless. It's about learning to stay with yourself when you feel broken, unlovable, or behind. To hold your own hand on the nights you're sure you ruined everything, and not abandon yourself again. Maybe the real shift doesn't come from doing more work on yourself. Maybe it begins when you stop trying to earn your own love at all, and start gently asking why you ever believed it had to be earned in the first place. Tracing the origin of I am not enough. So instead of asking, what's wrong with me? Why am I like this? I want to invite you into a different question, a slower one. Where did I learn to see myself this way? Not in theory, but in real moments, with real people, in real rooms you can still almost smell and hear. Can you remember the first time you felt like love had conditions? Maybe it was a report card on the kitchen table, and they lit up only when they saw the A's. Maybe it was the way the room went cold when you cried, the way you were sent to your room for being too sensitive, the way the night felt heavier because your hurt had nowhere safe to land. You start to notice that you were praised for being easy, quiet, helpful, and corrected for being loud, messy, or needy. The hardest part is realizing that some of the people you loved the most were also the ones who taught you to doubt your own worth, not because they were monsters. Often, they were just tired, overwhelmed, carrying their own unfinished stories. Maybe they believed that pushing you, comparing you, withholding affection until you performed would protect you. That doesn't make you foolish for loving them. It just means your nervous system learned love as something you earn, not something you rest in. It's not just about obvious abuse or dramatic scenes. Sometimes it's an emotionally unavailable parent, always on their phone, or a chaotic home where no one had time to ask how you really feel. Sometimes it's high expectations that sounded like, "We're hard on you because we know you can do better." Or subtle favoritism, where one sibling's achievements filled the whole house while you faded into the background. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just felt it as, "I am only chosen when I'm impressive." A child's brain doesn't say, "My caregivers are limited." It says, "Something is wrong with me." One sharp comment about your body becomes, "I'm unlovable unless I'm perfect." Getting in trouble for crying becomes, "My feelings are too much. I am too much." Being ignored when you were lonely becomes, "Needing love is a burden." From a few repeated moments, you quietly build a whole identity. What scares me most is how ordinary these moments can look from the outside. No big trauma, just 1,000 small silences, comparisons, and sighs that slowly teach you to shrink. As long as you haven't looked back with clear eyes, you keep assuming this belief is the truth about you, instead of a story that was handed to you. You were not born believing you were not enough. That belief was given to you, piece by piece. And anything learned, that slowly can be unlearned just as gently. In the next part, I want to show you how to start loosening its grip, without having to hate the people who placed it there. Seeing the pattern, instead of blaming the person. So, when I say this belief was handed to you, I'm not just talking about sentences people said. I'm talking about the shape your whole life took. The way you started moving through rooms, through love, through nights where the silence got so loud, you could hear every thought that said, "If I was different, they would have stayed." There's a big difference between, "I am broken," and, "I learned patterns that once kept me safe but now keep me stuck." One is a verdict on your soul. The other is a story about how you survived. And you did survive, even if you call it people-pleasing. Perfectionism, overachieving, emotional numbing, avoiding intimacy, or clinging so tightly you scare yourself. Those are not random flaws. Those are strategies. Think about the times you swallowed your needs because asking felt dangerous. The way you said yes when you meant no, just to avoid being left alone. That's people-pleasing. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere along the way, love started to feel conditional, and you learned that being easy, being good, being low maintenance might keep you chosen for a little longer. Or the way you chase perfect grades, a perfect body, a perfect life. You fixed everything they said was wrong with you, and they still didn't stay. That doesn't make you a failure. It just means perfectionism was your way of bargaining with a world that made love feel like a prize you had to earn. Research even shows that when affection is given only for performance, anxiety rises, not worth. Overachieving, staying busy, always improving yourself, can look impressive from the outside. Inside, it's often a running from that lonely feeling that catches you at night when the work is done. Emotional numbing can look like being fine all the time. Avoiding intimacy can look like being picky. Clinging can look like devotion. The hardest part is these patterns can pass for personality. You start saying, "This is just who I am," instead of, "This is what I had to become to feel a little less hurt." What scares me most is how long you've carried that confusion. How long you've mistaken your survival strategies for your identity. But there's nothing wrong with you for adapting. In an unpredictable home, in a family where love was scarce or came and went without warning, these patterns were intelligent. They kept you from shattering. It's not just about understanding them in your head, it's about softening toward them. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can still turn toward these patterns with curiosity instead of self-hatred. You can sit in the quiet and gently ask, when did I first start acting this way? What was I afraid would happen if I didn't? You don't have to dig for every memory, just notice what your body remembers. Because once you can see that you are not your patterns, a new door opens. You can stop asking, how do I fix myself? And begin asking, what does enough even mean if it's not this? And that question can change everything about the kind of love you let in next. Redefining enough, more than a moving target. So when you ask, what does enough even mean if it's not this? I think about how my own answer has never stayed still. Every time I got close to what I thought would finally quiet the noise, the goalpost slid a little further into the dark. You hit the grade, you lose the weight, you get the job. For a week you can almost breathe, and then you start hearing it again. Not quite, not yet, not enough. You fixed one thing they said was wrong with you, and like clockwork, another flaw appears in the mirror. You earn one person's approval, and instead of resting, you start scanning for the next person who still isn't impressed. It's not just about ambition or wanting to grow. The hardest part is noticing how restless it feels in your body, how you can't actually land anywhere, because the standard keeps moving the second you touch it. At some point you have to ask if the line is always out of reach. Was it ever meant to be reached at all? What scares me most is realizing that the answer might be no. That this version of enough was built out of fear and old conditioning, not truth. It was designed to keep you running. As long as you haven't arrived, you keep working, pleasing, perfecting, hoping that one more improvement will finally buy you love. But living like that keeps you in survival mode. You walk into a room and your nervous system is already scanning. What's missing? What's wrong? What do I need to fix before anyone can really see me? Nights get especially loud. The silence makes every unfinished project, every soft part of your body, every unanswered message feel like evidence against you. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like you're perpetually almost worthy does. And underneath all the hustle is a belief system, not, I am a person to be held, but I am a problem to be solved. You start treating your heart like a project plan. You turn love into a performance review. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow, to apologize, to learn. That doesn't make you broken. It just means you care. But when growth is the price of admission for basic warmth, it stops being growth and becomes self-erasure. So whose rules are you following when you say you're not enough yet? Whose voice do you hear when you feel like you're failing? The parent who only praised achievements, the partner who withheld affection, the culture that worships productivity and appearance. If love was always conditional, of course you learn to measure yourself in checklists. What if enough was never meant to be about your output at all? Not your relationship status, not your body, not how quickly you heal. What if worth didn't spike when someone chose you and crash when they left? I'm not asking you to believe that yet. I'm just saying, to truly redefine enough, we may have to step outside the old rules entirely and ask a much more radical question. What if you were never meant to earn your right to exist? You were never meant to earn your right to exist? What if that question you've been living inside, have I finally done enough to deserve love, was never meant to exist in the first place? What if the whole idea that you have to earn the right to breathe, to be held, to be chosen, was the lie, not you? Your worth did not begin the first time you impressed someone. It did not start the night you finally got the text back, or the day a teacher said they were proud of you, or the moment your body fit a smaller size. Your worth began the moment you existed, before you could speak, before you could fix anything you think is wrong with you. What scares me most is how foreign that sentence might feel in your body. How quickly your mind rushes in with a courtroom of objections. But what about my mistakes? What about the times I hurt people? What about the relationships I ruined, the nights I broke my own promises? You start lining up your worst moments like evidence that you should be sentenced to being alone. So let's slow this down. There is a difference between your worth and your behavior. Your actions can be harmful or kind, wise or unwise. You can apologize, repair, grow, set boundaries, learn to love better. But your worth is not up for debate. It is the ground, not the scoreboard. The scoreboard can change. The ground is what everything stands on. Think about a newborn baby. It can't work, can't perform, can't make anyone proud on purpose. It cries in the middle of the night, needs everything, gives nothing back except its existence. And yet you look at that baby and you know without any argument, this little life is worthy of love. No one says, earn it first. Somewhere along the way, you stop seeing yourself with that same softness. Maybe you were only praised when you achieved. Maybe love felt warmer on the days you were easy to handle, quieter on the days you were too much. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just remember the feeling. If you did well, you were safe. If you failed, you felt wrong. It's not just about self-esteem. It's about an entire system inside you that equates being lovable with being useful, impressive, never inconvenient. The hardest part is, your nervous system got used to that. As long as you haven't achieved, you feel on edge. As long as you haven't fixed everything, you feel like a problem. Accepting inherent worth won't happen in one beautiful epiphany. It's a slow, repeated remembering. Some days you will forget and go back to earning. That doesn't make you broken. It just means you're practicing. In the next part, I'm not going to ask you to suddenly believe you are enough. That would be another standard to fail. I'm only going to ask you to experiment with something softer. What if, for a moment at a time, you treated yourself as if you might already be worthy, even before anything changes? Learning to stay with yourself when you feel like a disappointment. So let's go to the exact moment this really matters. Not the day you feel strong and hopeful, but the night you send the text and they don't answer. The interview you thought went well, and then you get the polite rejection. The photo you see of them with someone else. The moment you say the wrong thing and watch their face change. That sharp drop in your stomach. That quiet, familiar thought. Of course, it's me. You feel the heat rise in your chest, the tightness in your throat, that urge to escape your own skin. And almost without thinking, you start doing what you always do. You attack. What's wrong with you? Why did you say that? Why aren't you more confident, more attractive, more easy to love? Or you numb. You open your phone, you scroll, you work late, you clean the kitchen at midnight so you don't have to feel how lonely the silence is. Sometimes you sprint in the opposite direction and chase a quick fix. New workout plan, new haircut, new self-improvement project. You tell yourself, if I just fix this one thing, I won't have to feel this hurt again. But the hardest part is that even when you succeed, the anxiety doesn't really leave. Research on conditional love shows that when care only comes after performance, people feel more fragile, not safer. You know that in your bones. You've lived it. Because in the exact moments you most need comfort, you turn on yourself. You repeat the same conditional love you grew up with. I'll be kind to you when you're better. When you stop messing this up. When someone finally chooses you. Until then, you treat yourself like a problem to be solved, not a person to be held. That doesn't make you dramatic or broken. It just means your nervous system learned that panic and self-blame were the price of staying attached. So here's the experiment. What if, the next time that wave of "I'm not enough" crashes over you, you don't try to fix it or punish it? What if you just stay? You notice your breath, even if it's shallow. You place a hand on your chest, feel the rise and fall, and quietly name it. I feel like I'm not enough right now. You're not saying it's true. You're saying it's here. It's not just about a technique. It's about practicing a new internal relationship, one where you don't have to pass a test to deserve your own gentleness. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can still offer yourself something different. If it helps, imagine a younger version of you sitting on the edge of their bed after being left out, convinced something is wrong with them. Would you tell them to toughen up, to be prettier, to stop wanting love so much? Or would you sit beside them in the quiet, maybe put a hand on their back and say, "You're not wrong for feeling this. You're not alone in this. I'm not going anywhere." You can borrow that same sentence for yourself. A grounding phrase like, "I'm allowed to be human right now," whispered into the night. A small gesture like holding your own hand when the urge to scroll hits. It will feel strange at first, maybe even embarrassing. Stay anyway. You start teaching your body that your presence is not something you have to earn by being perfect. This is where the shift really begins. Not in suddenly believing you're flawless, but in refusing to abandon yourself when you feel the most flawed. From here, the rest of the journey is about slowly building a life that reflects this quieter truth. You are allowed to be loved, even in the moments you feel most unlovable, and you don't have to wait for someone else to go first. The moment you realized trying harder wasn't working. And then there's this moment you don't really see coming. Not a dramatic night where you throw everything away, just a quiet day where you notice that even after all the healing, all the work, all the ways you've tried to be better, you still feel strangely alone inside your own life. You look around at the routines, the habits, the books, and something in you whispers, "I can't keep doing this." Sometimes it shows up as burnout so deep you wake up already tired, even if you slept. Not because you're lazy, but because it's exhausting to live every day as a project. Sometimes it's emotional numbness, where even the songs that used to make you cry just sound like background noise. Sometimes it's breaking down over the wrong coffee order, or a text left unread and wondering, why does this hurt so much when it's such a small thing? You start noticing how often your answer to pain is still, "I'll try harder." You're overwhelmed, so you design a new morning routine. You feel unlovable, so you add 5 more things to fix. New workout, new skincare, new therapy method, new productivity system. On the surface, it looks like growth. Underneath, it's panic. It's not just about wanting to feel better. It's being terrified that if you ever stop improving, love will finally give up on you for good. The hardest part is realizing that this strategy once kept you safe. Overachieving, overfunctioning, overfixing. It used to win you praise, attention, maybe even temporary love. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just remember the feeling. Being more useful, more impressive, more accommodating, and watching people stay, at least for a while. So of course your body learned, if I'm more, I'll be chosen. If I slow down, I'll be left. What scares me most is how long you can live that way without noticing the cost, because it doesn't look wrong from the outside. People call you strong, disciplined, inspiring. They don't see you lying awake at night, bargaining with yourself. If I fix this one last thing, maybe it will finally work. Maybe they'll finally stay. And when it still falls apart, you don't question the strategy. You question your worth. But there's a point where the very thing that once protected you becomes the cage you're stuck in. When every new routine feels heavier, not lighter. When every glow up leaves you more lonely than before. When you realize you've done everything they said would make you lovable, and the emptiness is still there. That doesn't make you a failure. It just means your old way of surviving has reached its limit. This is the doorway nobody talks about. The moment the question quietly shifts from, how do I fix myself so I can be loved, to, what if I'm not actually broken? As long as you haven't gone completely numb, that question will keep knocking. In the next part, I want to sit with you right there in that doorway and gently explore what love could look like if you stop treating your heart like a problem to solve. When your worth is measured in results. If you stop treating your heart like a problem to solve, another problem usually appears. How do you measure if you're finally okay? If you're not grading yourself on how broken you are, what do you grade yourself on now? That's usually when results quietly slide in and offer themselves as the new scoreboard of worth. You start replaying test scores from years ago, as if the number on a page could still decide how lovable you are today. You look at your body in the mirror and it's not just a body anymore, it's a report card. Every pound, every line, every angle becomes a mark for or against you. Not because you're vain, but because somewhere along the way you were taught that beauty is a currency and love is something you buy with it. It doesn't stop there. Performance reviews at work, how productive you were this week, how clean your room is by the end of the night. Follower counts, likes, messages left unread. Whether you're single or finally chosen. Even how well you're healing. How calmly you can talk about the person who hurt you. How quickly you move on. All of it turns into evidence in a quiet trial you keep running against yourself. What scares me most is how normal it feels. You don't walk around thinking, I am putting myself on trial today. It feels like reality. It feels like you're just reading the scoreboard everyone else can see. They got married. They bought a house. They have clearer skin, a smaller waist, a bigger paycheck, a calmer nervous system. So your mind whispers, say? It's obvious who is winning and who is behind. The hardest part is the emotional cost you pay for living like this. You can't rest because rest looks like losing points. You feel guilty for slowing down because what if someone passes you? Joy stops being something you're allowed to feel for no reason and starts being something you have to earn. And if joy can be earned, it can be revoked. One bad day, one failed exam, one breakup, and suddenly you're back at zero, wondering if you imagined all your progress. But it's not just about the results themselves. It's about the story you attach to them. I failed that test quietly turns into, I am a failure. They didn't choose me becomes, I am not someone people choose. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means no one taught you how to separate what happened from who you are. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can still question that. What if a bad grade is just a hard day? What if a breakup is just a redirection, not a verdict? In the next part, I want to sit with the gap between outcomes and identity, and slowly learn how to let something go wrong without deciding that you are wrong. The comparison trap. Everyone else looks chosen. And then, when you're already doubting yourself, you pick up your phone. There's this quiet ritual you don't even think about anymore. Thumb to screen. Blue light in a dark room. The night is already loud with questions, and now you're scrolling through everyone else's answers. Engagement photos. Soft morning selfies in someone else's arms. New apartments, new babies, new promotions. Captions about healing. About finally choosing themselves, about healthy love at last. You don't just see a picture, you feel that small, familiar ache in your chest, the one that whispers, you're behind. Behind in love, behind in life, behind in becoming, whatever healed version of you was supposed to finally be chosen. It's not just about what they have, it's about what you start believing. It means about you. Your brain fills in all the blanks the screen doesn't show. You see their smiling face and imagine a whole life where they never feel lonely at night, where they're always wanted, always secure, always enough. You see the ring, and you don't just think, they got engaged. You think, someone looked at them and said yes, and no one has ever really done that with me. What scares me most is how fast that story writes itself, how quickly you become the one exception in your own mind. The hardest part is that comparison doesn't feel like comparison. It feels like information, like proof, like a quiet verdict that everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in place. You tell yourself you're just being realistic, just observing. But really, it's like staring into a distorted mirror that only reflects your deepest fears back at you. It doesn't show their arguments, their therapy sessions, their lonely mornings. It only highlights your hurt. There's nothing wrong with noticing other people's lives. There's nothing wrong with wanting love or a family or a body you feel at home in. That doesn't make you shallow or ungrateful. It just means you're human and you're paying attention. But when every scroll turns into a quiet trial where you're always the one found lacking, that's not truth. That's an old wound using new evidence. Studies even show that the more we compare on these screens, the worse we feel about our own bodies, our own days, our own worth. You're not imagining that heavy drop in your stomach, but feeling it doesn't mean the story is accurate. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can still question the authority you've given those images. What if their happiness doesn't say anything bad about you at all? What if you're not behind, just on a different road? In the next part, I want to talk about how to step out of the role of the unchosen one, close the app, and slowly walk back into your own life as if it's worth living, even before anything big and shiny happens. Why being chosen never feels like enough. So you close the app, you try to walk back into your own life, and then something strange happens. You finally get the thing you thought would fix it. Someone chooses you. Someone says, I like you. You get the job, the yes, the invitation. And instead of that deep exhale you were waiting for, your chest gets tighter. You feel more alone in that moment than you did in the silence. Maybe it was the first time someone really pursued you. They texted first, they planned dates, they said all the right words. On paper, it was everything you said you wanted. But lying in bed at night, staring at their messages, you felt this low hum of suspicion. Do they mean it? How long will this last? What are they not seeing yet? Being chosen doesn't hurt. Wondering when you'll be unchosen does. Or you finally hear the compliment you've been chasing for years. You're beautiful. You're so smart. I'm proud of you. The hardest part is how quickly your mind swats it away. You start explaining it, shrinking it, doubting it. They're just being nice. They don't really know me. If they saw the whole of me, they take it back. Love shows up at your door and your first instinct is to check for the catch. There's a reason for that. If love used to come and go without warning, your nervous system learned that good things are dangerous. If affection was conditional, based on grades, looks, or how useful you were, then being praised now doesn't feel like safety. It feels like pressure. You don't relax into it. You brace. You start performing. You start scanning for the moment you'll fail the test you never agreed to take. What scares me most is how quietly this turns into self-sabotage. You pull away first so you don't have to watch them lose interest. You downplay your needs so you don't risk being too much. You overfunction in relationships, always the stable one, always the giver, hoping that if you are endlessly understanding, they will never leave. That doesn't make you broken or manipulative. It just means your body is still trying to protect you from old hurt using old rules. It's not just about finally getting love. It's about having somewhere inside you where love can land and not be treated like a threat. As long as you haven't built that inner landing place, every good thing will feel slightly wrong, slightly unsafe, slightly unreal. You will keep asking, why do I feel lonely even when I'm not alone. In the next part, I want to talk about how to slowly grow that inner ground, so love doesn't have to fight you just to stay. The inner courtroom, living on trial. All the time, that inner ground I mentioned. For a long time, it probably hasn't felt like ground at all. It's felt more like a courtroom, not a quiet, empty room, but one that's always in session, even at night when the rest of the world goes still. In this courtroom, you are always the one on trial. Every text you send, every silence you get back, every time someone doesn't choose you becomes evidence. You replay the last date, the last argument, the last time they pulled away, like security footage. Not because you like to suffer, but because you're trying to find the exact moment you went wrong. The verdict is never simple. It's never, "You're fine." It's always, "Not enough yet. Try again." You start waking up already defending yourself in your own head. You start explaining why you said that thing, why you stayed, why you left, why you still hope. You imagine what the judge would say about your body, your past, your neediness, your loneliness at night. And even when you do everything right, the sentence doesn't change. Be better, be smaller, be easier to love. This courtroom didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built brick by brick, when you were still too young to call any of it unfair. Maybe you grew up with constant criticism, where every mistake was pointed out, but your quiet efforts passed in silence. Maybe love showed up only when you achieved something, when you were impressive, when you didn't make anyone uncomfortable with your feelings. Maybe affection was unpredictable, warm one day and cold the next, so you became hyper-vigilant, studying every shift in tone like your life depended on it. When love felt unstable, your nervous system learned a rule. If I can just be perfect, they won't leave. It's not just about romance. It's grades, looks, productivity, politeness. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just knew it as, "I'm only safe when I'm pleasing someone." That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means your body took notes on what hurt and tried to protect you. The hardest part is that somewhere along the way, you started believing the prosecutor's voice was the voice of truth. That harsh inner commentary that says, "Of course they left," or "No wonder you're alone," doesn't sound like a scared part trying to keep you safe. It sounds like reality. It sounds like proof. What scares me most is how convincing it can be. How it can talk you out of love before love even has a chance. But as long as you haven't questioned who built this courtroom, you'll keep accepting every verdict as fate. In the next part, I don't want to smash the whole place overnight. We're not here to declare you healed and walk out. We're going to do something quieter, stranger. We're going to start asking where these rules came from, and we're going to invite in a different kind of witness, one that actually sees you and might tell a completely different story about the same evidence. When healing becomes another performance. When you start looking at the rules instead of obeying them, another layer shows up. It's the part of you that even wants to heal perfectly. Have you noticed that? You don't just go to therapy, you study for it. You don't just journal, you judge the handwriting, the insight, how deep you sounded on the page. Even your pain feels like it has to get an A. You light the candle, open the notebook, put on soft music at night so the silence doesn't swallow you, and then you quietly grade yourself on how well you're processing. Did I cry enough? Did I connect the right childhood memory? Did I say the impressive thing in session so my therapist knows I'm self-aware? It's not just about feeling better, it becomes about doing healing right. So maybe someone will finally see you as worth loving. The hardest part is how familiar this feels. The same part of you that chased grades, chased gold stars, chased being the good one in every room, slips into the driver's seat again. Only now it's wearing crystals and carrying a workbook. You start turning every insight into a competition you never agreed to. Who can forgive faster? Who can manifest love sooner? Who can outgrow their attachment style like it's a bad outfit from last season? Research calls it conditional regard, but you just know the feeling. Love only seemed to come when you performed, so of course your nervous system thinks healing works the same way. If you meditate every day, if you read enough books, if you stop being too much or too needy, then maybe you'll finally be chosen and never left. And when the relationship still falls apart, you don't question the rule. You decide you didn't heal hard enough. What scares me most is how easy it is to use healing as evidence that you were broken in the first place. Every appointment becomes a quiet reminder. See, something was wrong with you. Every exercise feels like proof you had to be fixed before love could stay. But needing care doesn't make you defective. That doesn't make you the problem. It just means you were human in rooms that didn't know how to hold you. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. There's nothing wrong with therapy, with breathwork, with late-night pages soaked in tears. The problem is when you can't rest unless you've earned it, when healing becomes another way to be alone with your own criticism. Have you noticed how you apologize to your therapist for not doing the homework? How you feel guilty for still hurting, like you failed the course of your own heart. As long as you haven't given up on yourself, this pattern can shift. We don't have to throw away every tool. We just have to change the hands they're in. In the next part, I want to show you how to move from performing healing to actually receiving support. Not through grand gestures, but through small, almost boring shifts that quietly teach your body a new rule. You were always allowed to be cared for, even before you were better. The cost of never resting from proving yourself, so when you live like that for years, always turning healing into homework, there's a cost your body keeps paying in the background. You wake up already tired, like you ran a marathon in your sleep. Your brain feels wrapped in fog. Simple decisions feel heavy. And you can't remember the last time you felt genuinely rested instead of just slightly less exhausted. Nights don't restore you. They just reset the cycle. You start snapping at small things, feeling irritable over a text, a delay, a tone of voice that might not even be wrong. Not because you're a bad person, but because your nervous system has been holding its breath for too long. Sleep gets weird. Either you can't fall asleep because your mind is replaying every conversation, or you crash hard and still wake up with your jaw clenched, shoulders tight, heart racing for no clear reason. Even the good moments get hijacked. You finally have a slow day, or someone offers you a quiet night in, and instead of relaxing, you feel guilty. There's laundry, there's work, there's some version of yourself you still haven't become. Rest feels like stealing. Joy feels like procrastinating. You sit on the couch and your body is there, but your mind is already writing the next self-improvement plan. And it's not just about your body. This way of living bleeds into who you choose. You find yourself drawn to partners you have to earn, people who are warm when you overfunction, and distant when you simply exist. You feel alive when you're fixing, calming, proving. Safe, steady love can feel boring, almost wrong, because it doesn't demand that you bleed for it. Half of you wants calm, and the other half only recognizes chaos as chemistry. Friendships start to mirror this too. You're the one who remembers birthdays, sends long messages at night, listens for hours. But when you're the one who's lonely, the group chat goes quiet. Workplaces reward you for this pattern as well. They praise your extra hours, your willingness to pick up the slack, your inability to say no. Burnout gets framed as dedication, and then you go home to a room that feels even more alone, wondering why you're surrounded by people and still feel so unseen. The hardest part is, you've called this normal for so long that imagining a life where you don't have to earn every breath of rest feels almost irresponsible. Like if you stopped pushing, everything would fall apart and love would disappear. But what scares me most is how much your body already knows this isn't sustainable. The headaches, the tight chest, the constant tired eyes, that doesn't make you weak. It just means the truth is starting to leak through the cracks. The body keeps the real score, even when your mind insists you're fine. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, there's still a chance to teach it something different. In the next part, I want to try something small with you. Tiny, almost invisible moments of rest that don't have to be earned, that exist even when you still feel not enough. Just to see what happens when you stop proving yourself for a minute and let your nervous system feel what it's never been given on purpose. Unqualified permission to exhale. Unlearning the myth of the fixed self. And once you exhale, even for a moment, something uncomfortable shows up in the silence. That question you've been organizing your whole life around. Who do I have to become so that love finally stays? Not just, how do I grow? But, what finished version of me will finally be safe from being left? You probably know that fantasy by heart. The future you who wakes up early without effort, body toned, skin clear, inbox empty. The you who never texts twice, never cries at night, never feels lonely in a crowded room. Confident, healed, productive, attractive, unbothered. The one who walks into any space and is instantly chosen, because now you finally deserve it. Do you feel how seductive that is? There's nothing wrong with wanting to improve, wanting to treat your body kinder, to handle conflict better, to build a life that feels like yours. It's not just about that, though, is it? It's the quiet rule underneath. As long as you haven't become that imaginary person, you're on probation. You can't rest. You can't be proud. You can't fully let yourself be loved. You're allowed to work on yourself, but not to actually live. The hardest part is how logical it can seem. Maybe you grew up with love that moved with your report card, your weight, your performance. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just remember the feeling. When you did well, you were safe. When you slipped, the warmth disappeared. So of course your brain decided, if I can just fix everything they said was wrong with me, the hurt will stop. That doesn't make you broken. It just means you were paying attention. But what scares me most is how this fantasy quietly erases the person you are right now. You start treating your current self like a rough draft, a temporary version that doesn't count. You start postponing joy, connection, even simple kindness, until you hit some invisible milestone. Your whole life turns into a waiting room. You sit there rehearsing your lines for the moment you're finally called in, while the actual moments of your life keep happening without you. Have you noticed how even when you level up, the finish line moves? New job, new body, new habits, and still, at night, the same loneliness breathing next to you in the dark. Social media keeps feeding you polished stories of people who look finished, and you compare your backstage to their highlight reel and decide you're still behind. So I want to offer you something different than a finished self. An evolving one, not fixed, not done, not perfectly healed, but worthy in motion. What if your value didn't spike when you achieve and vanish when you fall apart? What if the fact that you are trying, feeling, learning is already enough reason to be treated with care? In the next part, I want to practice something with you. Relating to the person you are right now as someone already worth showing up for, even while you're still changing, especially while you're still changing. Seeing the child behind the overachiever. So before we talk about how to show up for the person you are now, I want to ask you to do something a little uncomfortable. Can you picture the age you were when you first remember trying really hard to be good, or impressive, or low maintenance just to keep the peace? Not the polished version of you now. That smaller one. The one who went quiet when the room got tense. Maybe you see yourself at the kitchen table, gripping a pencil too tight, trying not to get a math problem wrong, because someone's mood depended on your grades. Maybe it is you cleaning your room before anyone asked, or pretending you were not hurt when they forgot again, because you did not want to cause trouble. Maybe it is you in bed at night, staring at the ceiling in the silence, promising yourself you would be perfect tomorrow so nobody would leave. That child did not wake up one day and think, achievement sounds fun. Let me build my whole identity around it. Overachieving was not a hobby. It was a survival strategy in a world where love, attention, or safety felt uncertain. You learned that if you were easy, if you were impressive, if you never needed too much, you might be chosen. You might be safe. You might not have to feel so lonely in your own house. Research calls it conditional regard, but you did not have those words. You just knew that when you performed, you were praised, and when you were messy, you were met with distance or anger or cold silence. So you started connecting worth with doing everything right. You started believing that if someone was hurt or left, it meant you failed. The hardest part is realizing how long you have been judging yourself for using the only tools that child had. You call yourself needy, intense, dramatic, too much, not enough. You call yourself stupid for staying, pathetic for trying, weak for still hoping. But that does not make you broken. It just means you were loyal to the only map you were given. What scares me most is how easily we forget to see the courage it took just to keep going. To keep getting back up after every disappointment. To keep loving after every hurt. To keep trying to be better. Thinking that maybe this time, finally, you would be worth staying for. It's not just about analyzing your childhood like a puzzle you can finally solve. You start to realize this is about re-parenting that younger self now. Letting them be more than useful. Letting them be held, not just productive. Letting them be wrong without losing love. In the next part, I want to show you what that can look like in small, grounded ways. Not a grand healing performance. Just tiny daily choices that tell that younger you are not alone with this anymore. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Naming the rules. You've been living under those tiny choices start to add up into something bigger. A different way of measuring yourself. A different way of answering that quiet question. Am I still lovable if I'm not fixing, not trying, not impressive? Because for most of your life, you haven't really been answering that question freely. You've been following rules, not rules anyone sat you down and explained. Hidden rules, the kind that sound like, I'm only lovable when I'm useful. If I disappoint someone, I'll be abandoned. If I'm not improving, I'm falling behind. Do any of those feel a little too familiar? The hardest part is, you don't walk around thinking, these are my rules. You just feel wrong when you break them. It's not just about dating either. It's the way your stomach drops when you see a message you haven't answered yet, because some rule in you whispers, I have to reply right away, or they'll think I don't care. It's the way you keep saying yes when you're exhausted, because another rule says, I can't say no, or else they'll stop choosing me. You start living as if love is this fragile thing you have to protect by overperforming. So how do you find your own rules? You listen for sentences that begin with, I have to, and I can't, or else. Especially around love, belonging, and being seen. I have to look a certain way, or no one will want me. I can't be too emotional, or else they'll leave. I have to be the understanding one, or else I'll end up alone. Can you hear how heavy those are? How they turn your whole life into a constant test you're scared to fail. What scares me most is how these rules feel like facts, not choices. They feel like gravity. You don't question gravity, you just obey it. That's why you keep pushing past your limits, apologizing for your needs, staying in rooms that hurt you. Not because you're weak. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your nervous system is still trying to keep you safe, using very old instructions. There's nothing wrong with you for having these rules. Most of them were written when you were too young to argue. Maybe love really did disappear when you cried, or attention only came when you achieved. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, those rules will still tug on you, especially at night in the silence, when you feel most alone and least chosen. We're not going to rip them all out at once. I'm not asking you to suddenly believe you're enough and walk away from everything that scares you. Right now, we're just naming the rules you've been living under, like turning on a light in a room you've been stumbling through for years. In the next part, I want to show you how to gently test those rules, one small experiment at a time, and see which ones still deserve to run your life and which ones are finally allowed to loosen their grip. Testing the old rules with small acts of disobedience. So now that we've named the rules, I want you to imagine this. It's a quiet night. Your phone lights up, and instead of rushing to answer in 3 seconds like you always do, you just let it sit there. Not forever. Not as a game. Just long enough to feel your heartbeat pick up and your old fear start whispering, if you don't respond right now, they'll leave. That's where we begin. With tiny acts of disobedience that almost no one else would notice, but your nervous system feels like a crime. Replying a little later than usual, saying, I'm actually tired, can we talk tomorrow? Instead of pushing through. Watching a show you love or taking a slow walk without earning it by finishing every task. These are not grand rebellions. They're small cracks in the wall you built to keep love from disappearing. The hardest part is, your body will react like you're doing something terribly wrong. Your chest might tighten when you put the phone down. Guilt might rise when you say, I can't make it tonight. You might hear an old voice. You're selfish, you're lazy, you're going to end up alone. That doesn't make you selfish or lazy. It just means you're brushing up against conditioning that taught you love is conditional on constant performance. When you try one of these experiments, I want you to pay attention. It's not just about the action, it's about what actually happens afterward. Does the person really get angry because you answered in 10 minutes instead of 1? Do they disappear because you admitted you were tired? Or do they say, of course, rest and stay? What scares me most is how often our fear predicts disaster, and reality quietly offers something softer. You start to see the gap between your rules and the truth. Research calls it conditional regard, that feeling that you only deserve warmth when you impress, achieve, or overgive. But notice what happens the first time someone still chooses you after you say no. Notice what happens the first night you let yourself rest and the world doesn't fall apart. As long as you haven't run every experiment yet, you can't say for sure that love always leaves when you stop overperforming. There's nothing wrong with feeling anxious or even a bit sick after these small acts. That anxiety is not proof you're doing life wrong. It's proof you're stepping out of a familiar cage. We're not trying to prove your fear stupid. We're gathering data, quiet evidence. One late reply, one honest, I'm tired, one unearned moment of joy at a time. In the next part, we're going to lay that evidence out together, like pages on the floor, and see which rules still hold, and which ones are finally ready to be rewritten into something that feels more like love than survival. Letting yourself be seen in small, imperfect ways, so when we spread those pages of evidence out on the floor, there's something else we have to add to the pile. Moments where you let yourself be seen. Not as the improved version, not as the impressive one, but as the person you are in the middle of the mess. Have you noticed how different that feels in your body? Performance visibility is like a spotlight. Honest visibility is more like a bedside lamp at night. Softer, closer, way more terrifying. Most of the time, you've been seen for what you can do. Your grades, your work, your looks, your emotional labor. You start to believe that if you're not performing, you're disappearing. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being invisible unless you're useful does. When someone loves your results, you feel chosen for a role. When someone sees your tired eyes, your shaking hands, the way your voice goes small when you say, I don't know, that's different. That's you, not your costume. The hardest part is that these moments are small and ordinary. They don't look like movie scenes. It's answering, how are you? With, honestly, I'm overwhelmed, instead of the polished story where you've already learned the lesson. It's admitting in a conversation, I don't understand what you meant, and letting the silence stretch instead of rushing to sound smart. It's letting a friend notice you're struggling to carry all the bags and not saying, "I've got it, it's fine," when it's not fine. What scares me most in myself and in you is how quickly we try to fix the moment we feel exposed. You cry and immediately apologize. You share something tender and then make a joke so it doesn't feel so raw. You say, "It's stupid, I know," before the other person can decide it for you. The hardest part is staying. Letting someone witness the exact second you feel too much or not enough, and not sprinting back into performance or disappearing into silence. There's nothing wrong with easing into this. You don't have to dump your entire heart on someone who hasn't earned it. You start with micro risks, one honest feeling instead of a neat summary. One, "I'm still figuring it out," instead of a perfect answer. One night where you text, "I'm lonely," to a safe person instead of pretending you're fine. That doesn't make you needy. It just means you're practicing a different way of being known. Because it's not just about telling the truth, it's about letting the truth be seen before it's pretty. These tiny, awkward, unfinished moments are like soil. As long as you haven't run away from them, something new can grow there. A version of enough that isn't earned by how impressive you are, but revealed by how you're held when you're not. In the next part, we're going to name that new kind of enough more clearly and look at what it asks you to stop performing for. Redefining enough from the inside out. So let's name it clearly now. Up until this point, enough has probably meant something like this: perfect, productive, impressive, never rejected. Always saying the right thing, replying fast enough, looking good enough, achieving more than the people around you so no one can secretly decide you're behind. Does that sound familiar? Does your chest tighten a little when you realize how much of your life has been an audition? Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen when you've done all of that does. You can fix your body, your habits, your communication, your schedule, and still fall asleep at night with that same old ache. The hardest part is realizing that chasing a flawless version of yourself never actually touched the place that feels lonely. It just kept you busy. It kept you performing so you wouldn't have to ask, "What if I'm already worthy, even when I'm not impressive?" The old definition of enough sounds like, "I'm enough when no one is disappointed in me. I'm enough when I don't need too much. I'm enough when they stay." It's not just about being loved, it's about being tolerated only when you're useful, entertaining, calm, never inconvenient. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you learned, probably very early, that love could be taken away if you took up the wrong kind of space. The new definition I'm inviting you into is quieter and honestly more terrifying. Enough as, I am allowed to be here as I am. Present, honest, human, still learning, still messy, still worthy. Not because you nailed every boundary conversation, not because you healed perfectly, but because you are breathing. What scares me most is how radical it can feel to say, I am still worthy on the days I disappoint people, rest, or fall short, and actually mean it. Can you feel how your body almost wants to argue with that? It's not just about repeating, I am enough, into the mirror and hoping it sticks. Affirmations can help, but they're thin if your life still runs on performance. You start to believe something different when you collect real moments where you're allowed to exist without doing anything special. Sitting in silence with a friend who doesn't rush to fix you. Letting yourself cry on a night you promised to be fun. Saying, I'm tired, instead of pushing through and noticing the world doesn't end. As long as you haven't given up on yourself, this is possible for you. So I want you to imagine, just for a minute, what would shift even slightly if enough meant allowed to be here as I am? Would you answer texts slower? Would you stop explaining yourself so much? Would you rest without turning it into a crime? In the next part, we're going to anchor this new definition into your days with small, concrete practices, so it doesn't just stay a nice idea you heard once and forgot. practicing worthiness in the smallest moments. So let's make it less abstract. When you wake up tomorrow, before you reach for your phone, before you remember who didn't text back, place a hand on your chest. Feel the weight of it. Feel the rise of your breathing. And quietly say, I'm allowed to be here today. Not because you earned it in the night, not because you proved anything, just because you woke up. It will feel small, maybe pointless. You might roll your eyes at yourself a little. That doesn't make you fake. It just means you're used to starting the day by checking what's wrong with you instead of what's already here. The hardest part is letting something so gentle count. Letting one soft sentence be enough of a beginning. Once a day, I want you to pause and look back over the last few hours. Not to judge, to notice one thing you did that wasn't about proving. Maybe you made tea and actually tasted it. Maybe you answered a message slowly instead of rushing to seem eager. Maybe you sat in the car for 2 extra minutes in silence before going back inside. Can you name one moment where you were a person, not a performance? It's not just about the moments themselves. It's about teaching your nervous system over and over that it can exist without constantly auditioning for love. Slow and reflective is how the body learns it is safe. Not the big breakthrough, not the dramatic night where you swear you'll never chase again, but these quiet, nearly invisible choices you repeat until they feel less wrong. You will forget. You will go days without putting your hand on your chest. You will remember only after another night of scrolling, feeling lonely and behind. You will feel silly talking to yourself in the morning, or guilty for naming a non-productive moment as a win. What scares me most is how quickly we turn even healing into another exam. But forgetting doesn't erase your worth. Resisting doesn't mean you failed. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can always begin again tomorrow. There's nothing wrong with needing reminders. Years of conditional worth do not unravel in a week of nice sentences. You start by interrupting the old story for 3 seconds at a time. Hand on chest, one non-proving moment. A little less hurry when no one is watching. These repetitions are like drops of water on stone. You don't see the change at first, but something is wearing through. And slowly, the story that said, "You're only lovable when you're impressive," starts to sound less convincing. You may notice yourself tolerating less chaos. You may feel a slight ache when someone offers half love, because some quiet part of you knows you're allowed to want more. In the next section, we'll talk about that shift, how these tiny practices begin to change who you let close, what you accept, and the kind of love you're willing to stand next to without shrinking. Letting go of the life that was built on not enough. You may feel that shift first as a quiet discomfort in the life you worked so hard to build. The same routines, the same goals, the same people you used to bend yourself around start to feel a little tighter, like clothes that shrank in the wash. Nothing dramatic has happened on the outside, but inside, something is no longer willing to disappear just to keep the peace. Have you noticed that? Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being unchosen by your own life does. You look at the career you chased to feel worthy, the body you tried to sculpt into lovable, the relationships you kept alive by overgiving, and you start to see the pattern. So much of it was built to answer one question. Am I finally enough now? And when your definition of enough begins to change, some of those structures stop making sense. They don't feel safe. They feel like cages you decorated. It's not just about adding self-love on top of the same exhausting schedule, the same one-sided love, the same performance. You can't sprinkle affirmations over a life that was designed around self-rejection and expect it to suddenly feel gentle. Sometimes healing means you slowly, carefully, stop doing the things that require you to abandon yourself. Sometimes it means you let a role go. Sometimes it means you stop chasing the person who only chooses you when it's convenient. That doesn't make you ungrateful or dramatic. It just means you're starting to believe your own worth. The hardest part is the grief. The grief of realizing you spent years trying to earn love by being perfect. The grief of seeing how many nights you stayed in situations that hurt just so you wouldn't be lonely. You're not only letting go of a job or a relationship or a fantasy, you're letting go of an identity. Who are you if you're not the one who overperforms, over-explains, overstays? Who are you if you stop fixing everything they said was wrong with you? What scares me most, and maybe you feel this too, is that it can look like starting from zero. Like all that effort was wasted, all that trying pointless. But you're not going back to nothing. You start from awareness, from knowing what conditional love feels like in your body, from understanding that no amount of glowing up ever quieted that old, hungry ache. As long as you haven't gone numb, that ache can become guidance instead of a life sentence. There's nothing wrong with mourning the life that doesn't fit you anymore, even if other people think it looks perfect from the outside. You're allowed to sit in the silence between who you were and who you're becoming, to feel wrong and rootless and unsure. This in-between isn't failure, it's the hallway between two worlds. And in the next sections, we'll walk into that next world together, where choosing goals, relationships, and love won't require you to leave yourself behind just to be chosen. When healing starts to feel like another performance. And in that hallway between two worlds, you do what you've always done when you feel lost. You try to be good at it, you download the right apps, you buy the right journal, you light the right candle at night. You highlight passages in books about attachment. You save posts about healing. You write affirmations you barely feel. You turn your heart into a project plan because that's the only way you've ever known how to feel less wrong. If you can't be perfectly loved, maybe you can at least be perfectly working on yourself, right? The hardest part is how familiar it feels. Therapy becomes another class you're scared to fail. You show up with notes, with insights, with tidy summaries of your week, hoping they'll think you're self-aware, that you're progressing fast enough. You start worrying, am I a good client the way you used to worry? Am I a good partner, a good kid? It's not just about getting better. It's about not disappointing anyone while you do it. You notice it in the small moments. You apologize for crying. You rush to say, I know where this comes from, so no one has to sit too long in your confusion. You try to have a breakthrough every session, like emotional extra credit. What scares me most is how easy it is to turn even your pain into performance, to hide the rawest parts behind impressive language, so you can still feel chosen for being strong. Journaling starts as a place to spill everything into the silence, but slowly it turns into a report card. Did you regulate today? Did you react better than last time? Did you catch every trigger, every thought? You start tracking symptoms and habits, not just to understand yourself, but to measure whether you're finally becoming someone worth loving. The numbers on your mood tracker begin to look like a scoreboard for your worth. There's nothing wrong with tools or with wanting to feel less lonely inside your own mind. The problem is when every tool becomes another way to prove you're not failing at life. Healing driven by fear sounds like, if I fix this, they'll stay. If I change fast enough, I won't be hurt again. It's frantic, impatient, full of self-surveillance. It keeps asking, am I enough yet? And never believes the answer. But there is another way. Healing rooted in care moves slower, almost annoyingly slow. It's more curious than critical. It asks, how do I feel? Before, how do I fix this? It lets you have sessions with no big insight, nights with messy journal pages, weeks where your progress is invisible from the outside. That doesn't make you broken or behind. It just means you're finally learning to stay with yourself instead of constantly rehearsing for someone else's approval. As long as you haven't turned completely numb, there is still a part of you that wants love more than perfection. In the next section, we'll talk to that part, the one who's tired of performing but terrified of who will stay if you stop. The quiet terror of backsliding. What scares me most is how quiet it is when you backslide. No big explosion, no dramatic ending, just a random Tuesday night where you hear yourself think a thought you thought you'd buried. You catch your reflection in the bathroom mirror and realize you're saying the same old lines to yourself again. Of course they didn't stay. Of course it's me. And your stomach drops because you thought you were past this. It's not just about the pain coming back. It's the story that rides in with it. The one that whispers, "See? You're still broken. You did all that healing for nothing." You start counting the books you read, the sessions you went to, the promises you made to yourself, and it feels like you're standing in the ruins of a house you rebuilt twice already. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Feeling like your progress was a lie does. Listen to the sentences that show up when you're spiraling. I should be over this by now. I'm wasting everyone's time. This means I'll never change. They sound so reasonable in the silence, so factual, like you're just being honest about how wrong you are. But that doesn't make you the truth teller. It just means shame has learned to speak in your voice. The hardest part is, you remember how hopeful you felt for a while. You remember sleeping a little easier, not checking your phone every night, going whole days without thinking about the person who hurt you. And then one song, one photo, one rejection, and suddenly your chest is tight like it used to be. You're back on their page. You're rehearsing conversations in your head. You start wondering, did I imagine all my growth? But nervous systems don't heal like straight lines on a chart. They move in spirals. You circle around the same wound, but you're not in the same place. Research even shows that people can feel just as anxious years later, yet respond with more self-compassion, more boundaries, more honesty. The feeling doesn't always prove the level of healing. Sometimes it's just an old alarm going off in a safer house. So try this tiny reframe. Instead of asking, "Why am I here again?" ask, "What's different about me this time?" Maybe you still cry at night, but you don't text them. Maybe you still feel lonely, but you tell a friend instead of disappearing. Maybe you still think, "I'm too much," but you catch it, even for 1 second. There's nothing wrong with needing to see even one small way you stayed with yourself. As long as you haven't gone fully numb, backsliding doesn't mean you're starting from zero. It means another layer is ready to be loved. What if the problem isn't that you're going backwards at all, but that the way you measure progress is quietly hurting you too? In the next part, we'll question the idea of progress itself and why always trying to improve might be the thing keeping you from feeling finally enough. When progress becomes a prison, what if the progress you're so proud of is also the thing quietly squeezing the air out of you? What if the way you measure healing is starting to feel less like love and more like a performance review you can never quite pass? You start with good intentions, a mood tracker so you can notice patterns, a habit app so you can sleep better, eat better, stop texting people who hurt you. At first it feels caring, almost tender, to check in with yourself every night. But slowly, without meaning to, you begin to watch yourself like a project instead of sit with yourself like a person. Every feeling becomes data. Every bad day becomes a red mark. Being alone doesn't hurt the most. Being treated like your own manager does. You wake up and immediately scan. How do I feel? What's my number? Am I doing better than last week? It's not just about healing anymore. It's about winning against your past self. And that pressure, that constant self-surveillance, starts to sound a lot like the productivity culture that already makes you feel like you're always behind. The hardest part is, some of it works. You do sleep a little more. You catch yourself before you double text. You can show your therapist charts and say, "Look, I'm improving." But then a night comes when you feel lonely for no clear reason, or you miss someone you swore you were over, and suddenly it feels like you failed an exam. One spike of sadness, and you start asking, "What's wrong with me? Why am I back here?" But what if you're not back anywhere? What if healing was never meant to be a straight line on a graph? Research says people who only feel loved when they perform end up more anxious even when they succeed. Conditional love from others hurts. Conditional love from yourself might hurt even more. When your own acceptance depends on the numbers trending upward, you never get to rest inside your own skin. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. That doesn't make you needy or dramatic. It just means you remember how much it hurt when you didn't know how to protect your heart, and you don't want to go through that again. But sometimes the kindest progress is no visible progress at all. A plateau. A season where the goal is not better than last week, but gentler than last night. What scares me most about our obsession with progress is how easy it is to miss the quiet victories that don't fit in an app. The way you breathe through a wave of shame instead of abandoning yourself. The way you let yourself cry without immediately turning it into a lesson. The way you allow a lonely night to just be a lonely night without deciding it means you're broken. So I want to ask you something. If no one could see your charts, your streaks, your glow up, if there were no audience and no gold stars, what kind of healing would actually feel kind to you? If healing didn't have to impress anyone, not even your future self, what would you let yourself stop tracking, stop fixing, stop improving for a while? In the next part, we'll talk about what it means to be with yourself in those in-between seasons, when nothing big is changing on the outside, but something softer is slowly shifting on the inside. The parts of you that refuse to be fixed sometimes. In those long stretches where nothing big is changing, another voice gets louder. The one that hears you say, "I'm healing," and quietly rolls its eyes. The one that shuts the laptop when you open another self-help article, that skips the journaling, that forgets the morning routine on purpose. Have you noticed that part of you? The one that says, "Why bother? It never works anyway." Right when you start to feel a little hope. We're so quick to call that laziness or sabotage or proof that we're the problem. You start telling yourself you just do not want it badly enough, that you must secretly love the hurt if you keep dropping the habits that are supposed to save you. But it's not just about discipline, and it's not just about motivation. That sighing, resistant part of you is not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to keep you from collapsing under one more disappointment. Think about when it first showed up. Maybe it was after you tried so hard for someone's love and they still chose someone else. Maybe it was the night you stayed up studying, or starving, or overachieving, and the grade, the body, the praise still didn't quiet the lonely. That doesn't make you broken. It just means a younger part of you learned, very logically, that effort does not guarantee safety, and change does not guarantee being chosen. So now, when you repeat affirmations in the mirror, there's a voice inside whispering, "We've heard pretty words before." When you plan a new routine, another part crosses its arms and refuses to move. What scares me most is not that you have that voice. It's that you keep calling it the enemy instead of seeing it as the tired guard dog at the door of your heart, barking at anything new because everything new has once hurt you. Research would call it a defense, a response to overwhelm and conditional love. But in your actual life, it feels like dragging your feet through wet concrete every time you try to heal. So what if, instead of forcing it to disappear, you got curious? What if, on a quiet night, you close your eyes and ask that resistant part, "What are you afraid will happen if I actually soften? If I actually let love in?" Listen to the answers that rise up, even if they sound dramatic at first. You'll be left again. You'll look wrong. You'll believe it's real and then lose it. As long as you haven't shamed those sentences back into silence, you can learn from them. The hardest part is not fixing these parts, but staying in relationship with them without calling yourself impossible. There's nothing wrong with needing that kind of patience, because the parts of you that refuse to be fixed might be the ones that know exactly what kind of love you can no longer survive. And if you follow them carefully, they might point you toward what you truly need next. What if you were never the problem to solve? So what if those parts that refuse to be fixed aren't glitches, but guardians? What if the version of you that shuts down, overthinks, or pulls away isn't trying to ruin your chances at love, but trying to keep you alive in a way that once made perfect sense. Most of us were handed one story: I am broken and need to be repaired. Every self-help book, every late-night spiral, every "I'll be better next time" apology seems to circle that same conclusion. You start believing your loneliness is a punishment for not healing fast enough, not glowing up hard enough, not being easy enough to love. But what if the story was never "I'm broken," and instead, I adapted to environments that didn't know how to love me well? Think about it in simple terms. Your nervous system is not abstract. It's your heart racing when they do not text back. It's the way your stomach drops when someone raises their voice. It's the numbness that shows up when a fight goes too far and you suddenly feel nothing at all. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means your body learned patterns. When connection felt unsafe, it braced. When affection was inconsistent, it clung. When asking for needs led to hurt, it went quiet. The hardest part is, these patterns look like personal failures from the outside. You call yourself needy because you panic when they pull away. You call yourself cold because you go distant the moment someone gets too close. You label yourself too much or too sensitive because you cry at night over things other people shrug off. But your nervous system is just repeating what kept you from breaking when you were smaller and had fewer choices. This doesn't erase responsibility. It's not a permission slip to hurt people and say, that's just my trauma. It's not just about understanding why you do what you do. It's about what you choose now that you understand. Context doesn't cancel accountability. It softens the shame around it. When you see your reactions as adaptations, you can hold both truths at once. I get why I do this, and I want to do it differently. So, choose one behavior you hate in yourself. The text you send even when you promised you were done. The way you chase people who clearly won't choose you. The habit of disappearing the second someone loves you back. What if, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you asked, "When did this become the smartest way my body knew to keep me safe?" What was the night, the silence, the look, the breakup, the childhood moment that taught you this was the only way not to shatter? What scares me most is how often you blame your character for what was really your nervous system doing its best with what it knew. As long as you haven't given up on seeing yourself with kinder eyes, there is hope. Because once you understand why your body chose these strategies, we can start talking about how to teach it something new. Something that doesn't cost you love every time it tries to protect you. The hidden grief beneath never enough. Once you see your nervous system as protective instead of defective, something else starts to rise up underneath all the strategies. It's quieter than the panic, softer than the self-blame. It shows up in the moments after you fail and in the moments you succeed and still feel strangely empty. It's the grief you've been walking around for years without naming. Because there was a childhood you didn't get. A home where you could be messy and still be loved. A night where you could cry and know someone would come, not sigh from the doorway and tell you to stop being dramatic. There was a version of you who should have felt safe without earning it, who should have been chosen without having to perform. That version never really got to exist. That hurts more than you admit. The hardest part is, you learn to call that hurt motivation. You got the grades, the glow up, the job, the body, the self-improvement plans. You turned pain into productivity because what else were you supposed to do? As long as you were busy fixing, improving, proving, you didn't have to sit in the silence and feel how much love you never got. Striving became a lid on your grief. If you can just become enough, maybe you won't have to mourn the years when you weren't. It's not just about wanting to be better. It's about being terrified of what happens if you stop. What scares me most, and maybe you too, is the thought that if you put everything down for even a week, all the sadness you've outrun will finally catch up. The anger at the parents who were inconsistent, the loneliness of being the good one who never caused trouble, but never felt really seen. The heartbreak of realizing you were loved for your usefulness, not your soul. So you keep going. Another course, another routine, another promise that this time you'll finally feel right. And when you still feel lonely at night, you decide you must be even more broken than you thought. But that doesn't make you broken. It just means the real wound isn't a lack of effort. It's the absence of unconditional love when you were small enough to think everything was your fault. There's nothing wrong with wanting to grow, with wanting healthy love now. But healing isn't only about upgrading your habits. Sometimes it's about finally letting yourself cry for the child who had to earn every scrap of affection. Letting yourself grieve isn't giving up on yourself. It's the first time you stop abandoning how much it actually hurt. You start saying, "Of course I feel this way." You start honoring the nights you went to bed alone in a house full of people. And as long as you haven't shut that grief away forever, there is hope. Because what if the doorway to feeling enough isn't another improvement plan, but learning how to meet that grief without running? What if the moment you stop outrunning the sadness is the moment a different kind of love finally becomes possible? Letting yourself mourn the love you worked so hard for. So maybe this is where we start. Not with another plan to improve yourself, but with letting yourself mourn the love you worked so hard for. Not the fantasy of it, but the hours, the years, the versions of you that kept asking, "If I fix this, will I finally be chosen?" How many nights did you lie awake replaying every conversation, trying to locate the exact thing you did wrong? Let yourself remember the specific ways you tried to be good enough. The grades you chased because someone only praised you when you excelled. The way you became the caretaker, always listening, always available, because being useful felt safer than being needy. The way you learned to shrink in rooms, to talk softer, take up less space, so no one could say you were too much. The hardest part is how natural it all feels now, like breathing. Maybe you perfected everything they pointed at. You lost weight, changed your hair, curated your photos so you looked effortless and bright. You overachieved at work, said yes to every favor, became the person who never drops the ball. And still, at night, the silence was loud. You start realizing it's not just about what you did. It's about how love was always something you had to earn, never something you could simply receive by existing. There's a special kind of heartbreak in seeing how much of your life became an audition. How many relationships felt like trying out for a role in someone else's story, hoping they'd keep you in the cast this time. Not because you're dramatic, but because being unchosen after all that effort cuts deeper than just being alone. It makes you question your entire script. Were you ever really living your life or just rehearsing for someone's approval? What scares me most is how easy it is to turn that realization into self-hate. To look back at the people-pleasing, the perfection, the chasing, and call yourself pathetic. But that doesn't make you weak. It just means you adapted to the kind of love you were offered. Research even has a name for it. When affection only comes with performance, you learn to perform or feel worthless. There's nothing wrong with the part of you that tried to survive that. So instead of judging those versions of you, what if you honored them? You could light a small candle one night, sit in the quiet, and write down the different selves you became to be loved. The overachiever, the caretaker, the quiet one, the perfect one. For each one, you write a single sentence of thanks. Thank you for trying to keep me safe. Thank you for helping me not feel so lonely. You do not correct them. You do not shame them. You just let them be real. And as long as you haven't turned away from those selves in disgust, there is hope for a different way to love. Because once you've mourned the roles you played, you can start asking a new question. Who are you when you're not auditioning at all? The fear of who you'd be without the struggle. Who are you when you're not auditioning at all? Sometimes when I ask myself that, the room goes quiet in a way that feels less like peace and more like panic. Because for so long, I have known myself as the one who tries. The hard worker, the fixer, the strong one who holds everyone else together while my own chest feels like it's splitting at night. You start confusing those roles with your actual self until "I'm tired" feels the same as "I'm disappearing." Maybe you've been the overachiever since you were a child. The good grades, the clean room, the polite smile. Not because you were born organized, but because you learned very early that being impressive kept you from being ignored. Being useful kept you from being left alone in the silence. It's not just about ambition, it's about survival. If you're not the one who performs, what if you're the one who's forgotten? So when someone says, "You don't have to work so hard anymore, you're allowed to rest," it doesn't land as kindness. It lands as a threat. If I'm not constantly improving, what do I offer? Who am I if I'm not useful, not the one who can be counted on, not the one who will bend until it hurts, just to keep love from walking away? The hardest part is not putting the work down. The hardest part is facing the empty space where your old identity used to be. Attachment to struggle starts to feel safer than softness. At least you know how to hustle for affection. At least you understand how to earn every drop. Being the one who never stops trying might exhaust you, but it also gives you a script. You wake up and you know your lines. You know how to be needed. Stepping into a version of you who is allowed to rest, who can receive without performing, feels like walking onto a stage with no costume, no lines, no guarantee anyone will still choose you. There's nothing wrong with you if the idea of an easier love feels wrong. That doesn't make you broken or dramatic. It just means your nervous system has been trained to pair love with effort, attention with anxiety. As long as you haven't known a love that stays when you're ordinary, your body will keep asking, "Are you sure I'm allowed to stop proving myself?" So I want to ask you gently, what scares me most about being someone who doesn't have to earn every drop of love they get? If you weren't the hard worker, the fixer, the strong one, the overachiever, would there be anything left? Or is there a quieter self waiting underneath? One you've never really met, because meeting them would change everything you think you have to do to be loved. And if that self is real, then the life and the love that would fit them might be real too. But to find out, you would have to risk something the old roles never let you risk. You would have to let yourself be seen without your armor and see who stays. Meeting the you who exists beyond performance. So how do you even begin to meet that quieter self without armor, without performance, without the constant fear of being left? It sounds huge, but it doesn't start in some dramatic healing retreat. It usually starts in the smallest, most ordinary moments, the ones you almost never notice because no one is there to clap for them. Think about when you're alone in your room and the day is finally over. The door's closed, the notifications are off. The night feels thick with silence. You're not on a call, not replying, not proving anything. Maybe you're just lying on your bed, staring at the ceiling, or scrolling without really seeing. That version of you, the one whose face softens when no one is watching, might be closer to who you really are than the one who impresses everyone. Or that moment on the bus or train when you zone out and your mind drifts. City lights passing, someone's music leaking through cheap headphones, your body swaying with the movement. You're not rehearsing what to say, you're not replaying what went wrong, you're just there. Not because you tried to be mindful, but because your nervous system got tired of performing for a second and slipped into itself. There are those sudden laughs too, the ones that surprise you. A stupid video, a private joke you remember, a thought that makes you smile alone in your kitchen. No audience, no one to think you're charming. Just a sound that escapes your chest before you can curate it. It's not just about the laugh, it's about the part of you that still reacts freely, even after everything that hurt you. What if these in-between moments are glimpses of the you who isn't trying to be impressive or lovable? The you who exists even when you're not fixing yourself, not glowing up, not trying to earn a place in someone's future. That doesn't make your ambition or your care fake. It just means there is a layer underneath them that might be truer, softer, less exhausted. You start by noticing what your body does when no one needs anything from you. How do your shoulders sit when you're not on? How do you breathe when you're not bracing for the next hurt or the next test? What do your hands reach for when you're not trying to be productive or good, when the only witness is you? The hardest part is that this self may feel blurry or unreachable at first, especially if you grew up with conditional love, where your worth rose and fell with grades, looks, or usefulness. Your system learned to distrust anything that wasn't performance. So when you finally stop, the silence can feel wrong, almost scary. You might even feel more lonely when you meet yourself without distraction, because there's no applause to drown out your doubt. But there's nothing wrong with you if you can't fully feel that deeper self yet. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, as long as some small part of you still hopes for a love that feels calm and safe, that self is there. What scares me most, and what also gives me the most hope, is that you don't have to see them clearly for them to be real. You only have to act as if they exist long enough to notice their quiet patterns. So the next time you're alone, instead of rushing to fill the silence, what if you let yourself watch? Not judge, not fix, just notice. Because the more familiar you become with the you who exists beyond performance, the easier it becomes to imagine a life and a love that could actually meet them. And that changes what you're willing to stay for and what you finally learn to walk away from next. Why rest feels dangerous when love was conditional. So when you finally do sit down, when the room goes quiet and there's nothing left to fix for a moment, notice what happens inside your chest. The silence doesn't feel gentle, does it? It feels loud. You can feel your body almost flinch, like it's waiting to be told you're wasting time. Like any second, someone will walk in, look at you resting, and decide you're the problem. Because in the world you grew up in, rest was never neutral. Rest was evidence. Rest was the moment a parent's face hardened and they called you lazy. Rest was when the good grades suddenly didn't count because your room was messy. Rest was when you stopped moving long enough for them to notice you, and somehow noticing you meant listing everything you were doing wrong. So you learned that stillness was dangerous. Not because you were alone, but because being seen in your softness always seemed to end in hurt. The hardest part is, your body remembers even when your mind says, "I know better now." So when you try to lie on the couch for 10 minutes, your thoughts start racing. Did I answer that message? Should I be working out? Am I falling behind? You feel guilty for breathing. You feel wrong for not producing. You start bargaining with yourself, promising you'll rest later if you can just get one more thing done now. It doesn't feel like self-care. It feels like you're disobeying some invisible rule. And what scares me most when I look at my own patterns is realizing it's not just about productivity, it's about love. Your nervous system learned that being chosen was tied to performance. Good mood, good grades, good body, good help. So of course, stillness feels like vulnerability. If you're not actively earning your place, some part of you is convinced you'll be rejected or quietly forgotten. As long as you haven't proven your usefulness today, you feel like your spot in people's lives is on trial. That doesn't make you broken. It just means your system is loyal to the rules that once kept you safest. There's nothing wrong with you for not being able to meditate for an hour, or for panicking when you try to do nothing on a Sunday. Your body is trying to protect you from a loneliness it remembers too well. So instead of forcing yourself into big, empty stretches of rest that feel like free fall, what if you start with micro rests? 30 seconds where you pause before answering a message. 3 slow breaths in the bathroom at work with the door locked. Sitting in your parked car at night for 1 extra minute before you go inside and perform again. Tiny, almost secret moments where you let your shoulders drop and tell yourself, "For this breath, I don't have to earn love." They won't feel comfortable at first. You might even feel more anxious, like you're doing rest wrong. But these small experiments are how you teach your body that stillness doesn't always end in criticism, that you can be unproductive and still not be abandoned. And maybe learning to rest, in these small, defiant ways is one of the most radical ways you rewrite what you believe you're worth next. Learning to rest without earning it first. So maybe this is where you start breaking the oldest rule you learned, that you have to be exhausted, empty, or in pieces before you're allowed to rest. That you have to earn every breath, every pause, every quiet night on the couch by proving how hard you've tried not to be a burden. Who taught you that being tired was a requirement, not a signal? The hardest part is this rule sounds reasonable in your head. You tell yourself, once I finish this, once I fix that, once I deserve it, then you'll lie down. Then you'll put the phone away. Then you'll let yourself feel. But rest, that's always waiting for a future version of you, is just another way of saying, I'm not enough yet. It keeps moving the finish line every time you get close. So we practice something smaller, less impressive. You're washing dishes and you just stop for a moment. You let the water run and you lean on the counter and close your eyes for 30 seconds. Not because you earned it, but because you exist. You're in the middle of answering emails and you lie down on the floor for 5 minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to your own breathing like it's a song. You put on an actual song and, for once, you don't multitask. No scrolling, no folding laundry, no self-improvement podcast in the background. Just one song, one body, one breath. What scares me most is how fast the guilt rushes in. The bargaining. I'll rest now, but I'll work twice as hard after. I'll lie down, but only if I also meditate or journal so it still counts as growth. You start turning even rest into a performance review. Instead of obeying that voice, what if you got curious about it? Who are you afraid will be disappointed if you simply lie there and do nothing? Whose love are you still trying to keep by never looking lazy, never looking like you need too much? There's nothing wrong with noticing that you feel wrong when you stop. That doesn't make you weak or dramatic. It just means your nervous system was trained on conditional regard. Affection when you performed, distance when you didn't. Of course, your body flinches when you put the work down. Of course, silence feels dangerous when praise was always the proof you were safe. So each tiny act of rest becomes an experiment. Can I let myself exist for this 1 minute without producing, fixing, or improving anything? Can I believe, just for the length of this song, that my worth doesn't change whether I answer one more message or not? It's not just about feeling less tired. It's about slowly teaching the deepest part of you. I am allowed to be here, even when I'm not useful. As long as you haven't given up on that experiment, your story with rest isn't finished yet. And the way you rest will start to change the way you reach for love next. The people who benefit when you never feel like enough. And here's the part that's hard to look at. There are whole worlds that quietly depend on you never feeling like you're allowed to rest. Workplaces that run on your self-doubt. Industries that live off the feeling that you're always one purchase, one achievement, one glow-up away from finally being lovable. Have you noticed how every ad whispers the same thing in a different outfit? You're almost there. Fix this, buy this, change this. Then you'll be enough. It's not just about beauty or status. When you were a child who learned that love came when you performed, that love arrived with grades or good behavior, you became the perfect adult customer. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just feel it as anxiety. If you're only worthy when you're improving, you will keep signing up for another program, another plan, another way to be less wrong. The hardest part is, even when you succeed, the fear doesn't go away. It just moves the finish line. Social media turns that fear into a stage. You scroll at night and it looks like everyone else has been chosen already. Couples, weddings, perfect bodies, soft morning light on perfect lives. Studies say all that comparison makes people more depressed, more dissatisfied, more lonely. But the apps are built to keep you there, staring into the silence of your own screen, wondering what you still need to fix. You start believing that if you post better, look better, live better. Maybe you'll finally feel less alone. And then there are the quieter places where your not enough wound gets used. The friend who always leans on you but disappears when you need them. The partner who gives you half love, then calls you needy when you ask for more. The family member who praises you for being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who never makes a fuss. That doesn't make you weak for staying. It just means your overgiving has been convenient for them. Some relationships unconsciously rely on you over-functioning. As long as you're the one apologizing first, smoothing every conflict, accepting less than you actually need, the balance never has to change. What scares me most is how normal that can start to feel. Being under-cherished doesn't hurt as much at first as the thought of being alone again. So you stay, you work harder, you call it love. But what if you ask yourself one honest question tonight? Where in your life does believing you're not enough keep you compliant, quiet, or exhausted? Is it your job where you answer one more message so they won't see you as replaceable? Is it a relationship where you shrink your needs because you're scared they'll leave if you speak? Is it with your family, where you play the role they chose for you instead of the person you actually are? Seeing this isn't about blaming everyone else. It's about understanding why the wound is so persistent. Because as long as you haven't noticed who benefits from it, you'll keep calling captivity commitment. And the moment you start reclaiming your enoughness, some of these dynamics will shake. Some might even break. The next part is about what happens when you stop making your hurt so convenient. When your healing starts to change the rules. So what happens when you actually do it? When you stop making your hurt so convenient and you whisper no where you used to rush in with yes. When you close your laptop at a reasonable hour instead of staying up half the night fixing, proving, earning. When you start asking, quietly at first, can you meet me here too? At first it feels unreal, almost like you're playing a character. You cancel a plan because you're exhausted, not because you have a dramatic excuse, just because your body's heavy and your mind is loud. You don't send the long apology text when you haven't done anything wrong. You let their silence stay silence instead of filling it with explanations. And you watch the room shift around you. Because these relationships were built on you overgiving. They were built on you answering every late night message, showing up whenever someone felt lonely, listening for hours while no one really asked how you feel. The hardest part is seeing what happens when you stop doing that. People who loved the version of you that never needed anything might look confused. People who leaned on you like a crutch might sound disappointed. Some might even get angry. They say you've changed and they do not mean it as a compliment. They wonder why you're so distant, why you're making everything difficult, why you can't just be chill. You start hearing how convenient your lack of boundaries was for them. You start noticing who only calls when they're hurt and disappears when you are. You start realizing how much of your worth was tied to being endlessly available. And inside, the questions get loud. Am I being selfish? Am I overreacting? Am I asking for too much? What scares me most is how quickly guilt shows up, how fast your body tries to drag you back into the old role just so the room feels calm again. It's not just about saying no on the outside, it's about surviving the storm that no stirs up on the inside. That doesn't make you wrong. That doesn't make you difficult. It just means your nervous system learned that love was something you keep by overperforming. Research calls it conditional regard, but you know it as that feeling that you have to be impressive, productive, endlessly kind to be chosen. When you stop performing, all that old training panics. The friction is not proof that you're healing badly. Often, it's proof that you're finally living by a different definition of enough. You are no longer asking, how little can I need and still be kept? You are starting to ask, can love stay when I am human? As long as you haven't answered that with your whole life yet, this will feel shaky. Some connections will stretch to hold the new you. Some will break. The next part is about how to tell the difference without abandoning yourself again. The loneliness of outgrowing old versions of yourself. Some connections will stretch to hold the new you, some will break. And then there's the part no one really prepares you for. The stretch where you don't quite fit anywhere, including inside your own skin. It's that strange middle place where the things you used to do to feel loved suddenly feel wrong, but the new ways haven't clicked into your body yet. You stop over-explaining. You stop begging. You stop shrinking your needs just to be chosen. But you also don't have a steady sense of, this is who I am now. So you walk through your days like you're in a house that's half moved out, half not yet furnished. Where do you sit? Where do you rest? Where do you put your heart at night? The hardest part is how lonely it can feel to outgrow your own patterns. You look at old messages and barely recognize the person who pleaded for crumbs. You look at newer conversations and you hear this tentative version of you trying to set boundaries. Voice needs, say no. Neither one feels fully like home. It's not just about changing behavior, it's grieving identities that once kept you company, even when they hurt you. There's a quiet grief in realizing you don't laugh the same with the people you used to call at 2 a.m. You listen to the music you shared with someone who mishandled you, and you feel both the love you had and the way you abandoned yourself to keep it. You start seeing the group chats, the family dynamics, the friendships that only knew the version of you who overfunctioned. They still expect that person. You're still invited, but you feel strangely alone in the room, too aware to play your old role, too unsure to stand solid in the new one. What scares me most, and maybe scares you too, is that in this in-between, there are nights where you wonder if you broke something you can't fix. You left the relationship that hurt. You stopped chasing the almost. You stopped performing for conditional love. But now what? You scroll past other people's lives and it looks like everyone else found a place to land while you're floating between versions of yourself. That doesn't make you wrong. It just means you're in the exact place where the story usually cuts to a montage, because it's hard to watch in real time. This liminal space where your old coping mechanisms don't work, but your new self-trust is still fragile, is where the deepest redefinition of worth quietly happens. Research says we feel more anxious when love is conditional, even when we succeed. You're feeling that withdrawal. Your nervous system is learning that love doesn't have to be earned with perfection. There's nothing wrong with not belonging fully to your past or your future yet. As long as you haven't gone numb, this ache is proof something tender is forming under the surface. You can't see it clearly now. You might not trust it yet. But this isn't a sign you made a mistake. It's a sign you stopped abandoning yourself. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to stay with yourself here, so that what's forming doesn't have to disappear the moment love knocks again. Listening for the small, quiet enough inside you. So, stay here with me for a second in this in-between place. Not the rush of a new love, not the crash of another ending. Just this quiet middle, where the room is dim, your phone is face down, and for once you're not trying to fix yourself. Have you noticed what happens in that kind of silence? Sometimes it's small. A breath that actually lands all the way down in your chest instead of getting stuck in your throat. You're not thinking about who did or didn't choose you in that exact moment. You're just breathing. It doesn't last long, maybe 3 seconds before your mind runs back to what's wrong with you. But still, for those 3 seconds, you weren't broken. Do you ever notice that? Or you're on the train or in the car at night, and a song comes on that you love. For a verse and a chorus, you're gone. Not gone as in escaping, but gone as in fully there. You feel the drum in your ribs, your fingers tapping without asking permission, your voice mouthing the words you didn't realize you remembered. No one is grading you. No one is watching. You're not performing worth, you're just existing. The hardest part is you usually rush past that, like it doesn't mean anything. Think about the last time you laughed and surprised yourself. Maybe a friend said something honest and a little too real. and the sound came out of you before you could decide if it was allowed. For a moment, you weren't the hurt one, the lonely one, the one still trying to be enough. You were just here, with them, with yourself. That doesn't make you healed. It just means some part of you never stopped being alive. Or maybe it's even quieter. You're washing dishes, feeling the warm water on your hands. You're walking home, feeling your feet hit the ground. You're lying in bed, and for one brief second before the thoughts rush in, you feel your own weight on the mattress, and it doesn't feel wrong. It feels okay. Not amazing, not euphoric, just not failing. Have you let yourself count that? What scares me most is how quickly we dismiss these moments like they're accidents, glitches in the system of I'm not enough. But it's not just about big breakthroughs and dramatic healing. These tiny flashes are glimpses of you before performance, before judgment, before comparison. They're like the original version of you, the one who existed long before anyone taught you love had to be earned. There's nothing wrong with wanting more proof, more steady days, more calm nights, more people who see you clearly. But as long as you haven't gone completely numb, you can start a different kind of collection. Not of achievements or compliments, but of these small, quiet enoughs. A breath that lands, a song that carries you, a laugh that escapes, a second where your own presence doesn't feel like a problem. You start keeping them not as evidence you finally fixed yourself, but as whispers that maybe, just maybe, you were never the problem at all. And in the next part, we'll talk about how to listen to those whispers until they become a voice you can trust. When you don't know who you are without the struggle, you start hearing those whispers, and then something unsettling happens. The noise that used to fill your life goes quiet. No crisis to fix tonight. No new plan to become better by morning. Just you and the silence, with no emergency to explain why you feel the way you feel. It should be peaceful, right? But sometimes that stillness feels like standing in an empty room where all the furniture has been taken away. Who are you when you're not rearranging the chaos, not patching another hole in your own heart, not rehearsing the next version of yourself you hope someone will finally love? For a long time, maybe your role was clear. You were the one who tried the hardest, the one who hurt the deepest, the one who healed the most, the one who read every book, went to every therapy session, carried every relationship on your back. It's not just about self-improvement, it becomes an identity. If you're not the one endlessly working on yourself, do you still know how to exist? What scares me most, and maybe you too, is that strange emptiness when there's nothing obviously wrong to fix. No dramatic breakup, no clear villain, no new glow-up project. Just this quiet, unnerving question humming under everything. Who am I if I'm not broken, not fixing, not proving? There's nothing wrong with asking that. That doesn't make you ungrateful for how far you've come. It just means you're stepping into a kind of growth that doesn't give you gold stars or before and after photos. The hardest part is there's no clear measurement anymore. No scale, no grade, no productivity tracker that can tell you who you are now. So where do you look instead? Sometimes it starts in very small, almost boring places. The song you put on when no one else is listening. The way your body relaxes around certain people, even when you say nothing. The kind of evening that makes you forget to check your phone. These aren't achievements. They're clues. They're the parts of you that exist beyond hurt and performance. Research says we're shaped by conditional love, by being chosen only when we shine. But under that conditioning, you still have simple preferences, quiet values, a way you naturally move through the world when you're not auditioning. As long as you haven't gone completely numb, those parts are still reachable. The hardest part is allowing a version of you to exist that isn't always in crisis or repair mode, and trusting that this softer, less dramatic self is still real, still worthy, still allowed to be loved. Can life still count if you're not constantly surviving it or optimizing it? In the next part, we'll talk about that. about how to let life be more than a project you manage, and more like something you actually live in. A place where you're not just fixing the story, but finally getting to be in it. The loneliness of outgrowing old versions of yourself. But when you stop managing your life like a project, something else happens that no one really warns you about. You start to feel a little untethered. The routines, the roles, even the people who only knew you as the one who overgave, overperformed, overexplained, they don't fit as easily anymore, do they? You notice it in small, quiet ways. You answer a late-night text a little slower. You don't rush to fix their mood. You let a message sit in silence instead of sending a paragraph explaining why you're not upset. It's not just about boundaries, it's about realizing how much of your identity was built around being the one who always tried harder, always proved their love, always worked to be chosen. The hardest part is, healing doesn't usually announce itself with fireworks. It just quietly separates you from what you used to tolerate. You say no where you used to say yes. You leave earlier. You stop laughing at the jokes that hurt you. And suddenly, the people who were comfortable with the old you do not know what to do with this version who doesn't overfunction for their comfort. And in the middle of that, there's this ache. Because the version of you who tried everything to be enough is slowly fading. The one who stayed up at night rehearsing what to say, who changed their body, their schedule, their personality to keep love from leaving. Letting that self go can feel like a betrayal, like you're abandoning the only person who ever worked that hard to keep you alive. What scares me most is the in-between. You're no longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. There's no script for this middle place. You don't have the old role to fall back on, but you don't fully believe in the new one yet. You feel lonely in rooms that used to feel familiar. You miss patterns you know were unhealthy, because at least they gave you a clear job. Be better, be smaller, be useful, be impressive. There's nothing wrong with missing what hurt you. That doesn't make you weak or unhealed. It just means your nervous system remembers what felt predictable. Research even shows we cling to familiar dynamics, even when they damage us, because the unknown feels more dangerous than the pain we already understand. So instead of shaming those old versions of you, what if you honored them? You could write them a letter. You could say, "Thank you for surviving what I didn't know how to name. Thank you for overworking, overloving, over-explaining, because you believed that was the only way not to be alone." You can acknowledge what they carried so you don't have to keep carrying it in secret. As long as you haven't gone numb, this loneliness isn't proof you're going the wrong way. It might be the quiet sign that you're stepping into a life that will eventually fit you better, even if it feels too big right now. In the next part, we'll talk about that empty space you're standing in and how to slowly build a life that doesn't just almost fit, but actually feels like it was made with you in mind. When rest feels more terrifying than burnout, so you step into that bigger life for a moment by doing something small, like closing your laptop at 6, or leaving a message on read, or actually keeping the promise to take a day off. And instead of relief, you feel your chest tighten. The room goes quiet, but your mind does not. The silence is loud in a way that almost hurts. You lie on the couch, or in bed in the middle of the day, and you can feel the anxiety crawling under your skin. You start rehearsing explanations you might need to give later. You start planning how you'll make up for it tomorrow. Rest is happening on the outside, but inside you're sprinting. Does that feel familiar? For a lot of us, it's not just about being tired. It's about what rest seems to say about our worth. If you grew up with love that only showed up when you were useful, impressive, or easy, your body learned something very specific. Safety lives in effort. Safety lives in being the responsible one, the overachiever, the one who never drops the ball. So when you stop moving, it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like stepping out of safety with no one catching you. Research calls it conditional regard, but you just remember the nights you stayed up studying so you wouldn't disappoint anyone. Or the way praise only came with perfect grades, perfect behavior, perfect timing. Being alone didn't hurt the most. Being loved only when you were performing did. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means your nervous system is still convinced that rest equals danger. So when you finally slow down, the hardest part is not the doing less. The hardest part is staying. Sitting in the stillness without reaching for a new project, a new glow up, a new way to improve yourself. Letting rest be rest instead of strategy. No, I'll relax now so I can be more productive later. No, if I recharge, I'll be more attractive, more chosen, more ready for love. Just stopping. Can you feel how exposed that makes you? In that exposure, the intrusive thoughts get loud. I'm falling behind. Everyone else is doing more. If I stop, I'll lose everything I've worked for. At night, those thoughts echo even stronger because there's nothing to distract you. Nights are heavy because they strip everything down to the question, who am I if I'm not earning my right to exist? There's nothing wrong with you for thinking this way. That doesn't make you weak or broken. It just means you were trained to confuse exhaustion with proof that you're good enough. So we start small. Micro rests. 2 minutes where you put your phone down and feel your breath without judging it. 10 minutes on the calendar labeled unproductive, where the only rule is that nothing has to improve by the end of it. You pair those pockets of rest with self-soothing instead of self-criticism. A hand on your chest. A sentence like, I'm allowed to be here even if I'm not fixing anything right now. At first it will feel wrong, like you're stealing something you haven't earned. What scares me most is how many of us live our whole lives that way, always auditioning, never arriving. Learning to rest without earning it is one of the quietest, bravest ways to rewrite what you believe you're worth, just by existing. In the next part, we'll talk about how to build a life that reflects that worth back to you, so you're not waiting for someone else to choose you before you feel allowed to breathe. The quiet rage under I tried my best. But here's the part we don't talk about when we finally put the audition script down. The quiet rage that shows up in the silence after. The way you lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, and suddenly feel this heat in your chest when you remember just how hard you tried to be easy to love, and how little anyone seemed to notice. It's not loud, it's not throwing things or yelling. It's that simmering, low-grade anger that hums under everything. You replay every version of yourself you offered, every time you swallowed your needs, every time you stayed calm while someone else's chaos hurt you. And underneath the loneliness, there's this thought you barely let yourself say, how is that still not enough? The hardest part is how quickly you turn that anger against yourself. Instead of thinking, of course I'm angry, I was neglected, you start, I'm being dramatic, I'm ungrateful. Other people had it worse. What scares me most is how fast you rush to protect everyone who didn't show up for you, and abandon yourself all over again. You feel wrong for even noticing your own hurt. Attachment wounds teach you that your disappointment is dangerous. Maybe when you were small, any sign that you were hurt made the room colder, or made someone snap, or made them disappear into silence. So you learned to protect them from your feelings. You learned to smile instead of say, you let me down. You learned to turn rage into a self-improvement project. If you can just fix yourself, you won't have to risk anyone seeing how deeply they failed you. So you sign up for another course, another workout plan, another healing program. From the outside, it looks like growth. On the inside, it's often penance. It's not just about wanting to be better. It's about believing you have no right to be angry as long as there's anything left in you that could still be improved. And then there's the bitterness you're not supposed to admit. Watching people who seem to receive, with ease, the love, attention, or opportunities you had to bleed for. The friend who was cherished for the same softness you were mocked for. The person who was chosen after doing half the work you did. You feel envy and then shame for feeling it. That doesn't make you petty. It just means you're human, and you're finally noticing the cost of always being the one who understands. There's nothing wrong with needing somewhere safe to put that rage. You can start by writing it down uncensored, in a journal you don't pretty up for anyone. You can sit in therapy and say, "I'm angry," without immediately adding, "But they did their best." You can whisper to yourself, "I was hurt," and not rush to explain why it wasn't that bad. Allowing this rage to exist isn't about staying stuck in blame. It's about finally honoring the truth of how hard you've worked just to feel almost enough. As long as you haven't turned completely numb, this anger is a sign that some part of you still believes you deserved more. In the next part, we'll talk about what happens when you stop using that fire to burn yourself and start letting it light the way toward the kind of love that doesn't ask you to bleed to be chosen. When other people's healing stories make you feel defective, and then there's this other kind of hurt, the one that doesn't happen in a breakup, but in the quiet scroll. It's late at night, the room is dark, and you're in that familiar silence with your phone lighting up your face. Story after story, podcast clips, posts, everyone talking about how they hit rock bottom and then found the book, the therapist, the routine that changed everything. You watch them cry on camera about the past and then smile about the present. I did the work and now I'm healed. I barely recognize the old me. You feel that sting in your chest, don't you? Not because you don't want them to heal, but because you did the same things. You bought the same journal. You tried the same habits. You sat in the same kind of therapy chair, and somehow you still feel lonely in your own story. The comparison trap doesn't only show up in love or success, it sneaks into healing too. You start measuring your timeline against theirs. How long it took them to stop checking their phone at night. How quickly their anxiety eased. How fast they attracted a calm, secure partner after they learned about attachment. Suddenly, your own slow, messy progress feels like proof that something is wrong with you. The hardest part is that thought. They did what I did, and it worked for them. So what's wrong with me? It sounds so reasonable. It sounds like logic, but really it's just another old wound speaking. When you grew up feeling like love was conditional, your brain learned to interpret every difference as a verdict. If they're better, you must be worse. If they're healed, you must be broken. If they're chosen, you must be the one left behind. What scares me most is how convincing that shame can be. Attachment wounds turn neutral facts into personal failures. Different timing becomes too late. Different symptoms become too much. You forget about things like history, trauma, money, nervous system sensitivity, the kind of support they had that you never did. It's not just about effort, it's about terrain. Two people can walk for the same number of hours and end up in very different places if one is on a paved road and the other is climbing a mountain in the dark. There's nothing wrong with your mountain. That doesn't make you dramatic or behind. It just means your path asks more of you, and that your nervous system is telling the truth about what it's been through. Your body isn't the obstacle to healing, it is the map. Your history isn't the reason you're failing. It's the context that explains why it takes longer, why it hurts more, why rest is not laziness, but medicine. As long as you haven't given up on yourself, you are not stuck. You're in process. Maybe the real shift now isn't to chase someone else's breakthrough arc, but to learn how to define progress in a way that actually fits your body, your story, your capacity. In the next part, we'll talk about what it looks like to measure healing by what softens inside you, not by how quickly your life starts to look like anyone else's, before and after. Redefining progress when you can't see it yet. So maybe this is where you are now. You've read the books, gone to therapy, watched the videos late at night with tears in your eyes, and somehow it still feels like you're looping. Same arguments in your head. Same type of person you fall for. Same hollow drop in your stomach when you feel alone again. And you start wondering, am I actually healing, or am I just getting better at pretending? The hardest part is when you can name every pattern, but you still feel it in your body like nothing has changed. You still freeze when someone pulls away. You still over-explain when you think you've done something wrong. You still lie awake in the silence, replaying every moment you might have ruined. It's discouraging, because you were promised that if you did the work, you'd finally feel different, and you don't. Not yet. What scares me most is how quickly we erase our own progress because it doesn't look like the kind we were taught to celebrate. We were trained to look for linear, obvious, permanent change. No more anxiety, no more overthinking, no more lonely nights. But healing almost never looks like that. It's not just about never reacting the old way again. It's about noticing the tiny spaces where something soft inside you is shifting. Like the moment you pause for 2 seconds before sending the paragraph, you know you'll regret. The way you feel slightly less drained after saying, "I can't talk right now. I'm tired," instead of pushing past your limit. The first time you hear your own self-criticism and think, "That voice is cruel," instead of assuming it's just the truth. That doesn't make you fixed, it just means your nervous system is learning. There are other options. Research says feeling genuinely accepted by even one person can change how safe your body feels. Sometimes that one person has to be you. You start noticing that after a date goes wrong, you don't immediately decide you're unlovable. You just let yourself be sad. You start leaving conversations that hurt, even if your hands shake. You start telling the truth a little sooner. These are not small things. These are the quiet beginnings of a different life. But when you're exhausted from years of self-improvement, you're only scanning for big, undeniable proof that you are finally better. The new partner, the secure attachment, the movie ending. Anything less feels like failure. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things. But as long as you haven't learned to see the micro shifts, you'll keep calling yourself stuck when you're actually in motion. So I want to offer you something simple. A gentle progress log, not about achievements, but about feelings, choices, and patterns. At the end of the night, you write down 3 things. A moment you felt even a little safer than before, a boundary you honored or wished you had, and one way you spoke to yourself with less violence. That's it. No grades, no gold stars. Just evidence that today was not the same as every day before it. Over time, you start to see it. You are not becoming a different person overnight. You are slowly, quietly becoming someone who treats themselves with a little more mercy. And maybe that's what love has been waiting for. In the next part, we'll talk about how this softer way of measuring progress can change who you choose and who you refuse to chase anymore. Letting go of the fantasy of being chosen. One day, and once you stop grading yourself like a project, something else you've been carrying quietly comes into focus. It's that daydream you almost don't want to say out loud. The one where there's this moment, this person, this opportunity that finally makes all of it make sense. One scene that rewrites every lonely night. Maybe it's a relationship. You picture someone walking into a crowded room and heading straight toward you. Like they've been looking for you for years. They see you, really see you, and suddenly every time you are passed over feels like it had a purpose. Or it's a job, a message, a chance where someone important points to you and says, I choose you. Not because you fought for it, but because, finally, you were just enough. This fantasy is not silly. It's a map drawn by a younger you. When you grow up around emotional distance, around parents who are there but not really there, your nervous system starts searching for a rescuer. Not just love, but a savior. Someone who arrives late and makes the hurt retroactively worth it. The hardest part is that longing makes so much sense. It was your way of surviving feeling invisible. Research has a dry way of naming it: inconsistent care, conditional regard, anxious attachment. But you don't need those words to remember what it felt like. Waiting for a parent to notice you. Bringing home good grades or perfect behavior like offerings to an altar that never really warmed. You start to believe that if you could just perform well enough, someone would finally come and rescue you from feeling so wrong and so alone. As long as you haven't questioned that story, you keep living like you're in a waiting room. You chase partners who are half in, hoping one grand gesture will turn them into the one who finally chooses you. You overwork, overgive, overexplain, hoping some mentor, some audience, some friend group will stamp you as worthy. What scares me most is how this can quietly steal your whole life. You're not really living it. You're rehearsing for a scene that never quite arrives. Admitting that no external moment can permanently erase not enough is brutal. There's grief in that, real grief. You might feel angry at the years you spent trying, at the people who taught you love had to be earned. You might feel lonely in a new way, because if there is no rescuer coming, what now? That doesn't make you dramatic, it just means you're finally telling the truth. There's nothing wrong with still wanting to be chosen. There's nothing wrong with hoping someone will walk toward you instead of away. But maybe the alternative isn't giving up on love. Maybe it's building a life where you're treated with steady, ordinary care. Choosing friends who text back without fanfare. Partners who show up on the boring days. Work that doesn't demand you bleed to belong. It's not just about fireworks, it's about quiet, consistent warmth. So if the fantasy of being finally, magically chosen can't save you, then what can? If it's not just about waiting for someone else to point at you and say, enough, what does it actually look like to choose yourself in the small, unglamorous moments no one else sees? Learning to choose yourself in small, unimpressive ways. So if the fantasy of being finally, magically chosen can't save you, then what can? If it's not just about waiting for someone else to point at you and say, enough, what does it actually look like to choose yourself in the small, unglamorous moments no one else sees? Because love yourself sounds pretty on a quote page, but in the middle of the night, when you feel wrong just for existing alone in your bed, it can feel useless. When you've spent years abandoning your own needs just to keep people close, how are you supposed to suddenly turn around and pick you? The hardest part is, those words can start to feel like another standard you're failing, another way to be not enough. What scares me most is how easily self-love becomes another performance. You post the transformation, you write the brave caption, you make the big declaration that you're done accepting less. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. But it's not just about the grand gestures. It's about what you do on the quiet Tuesday afternoon when no one is watching. When choosing yourself will not get you applause, a glow-up comment, or a new person in your bed. Choosing yourself can look painfully ordinary. You're in a conversation and a joke lands on you like a slap, and everyone laughs, including the person you like. You feel that sting in your chest. Instead of swallowing it and staying to prove you can take it, you excuse yourself, you step away. You let the silence hold you for a minute. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you stopped offering your hurt as entertainment. Or you notice you're hungry, but a voice says, you haven't done enough today. You don't deserve to rest, to eat yet. Instead of listening, you make a simple meal and sit down anyway. You go to bed when you're tired, even though part of you wants to stay up scrolling their page, trying to understand why they didn't choose you. These are not impressive acts. No one claps, but your nervous system notices. Each time you respond to your own need with care instead of criticism, something quiet starts to repair. Attachment research calls it having a reliable caregiver. You start becoming that for yourself. You start proving in these tiny, repetitive ways, I will not abandon you just because you're inconvenient. I will not starve you, overwork you, or keep you up all night just to chase love that hurts. At first, it might feel wrong, selfish, awkward. As long as you haven't learned any other way to be loved than overgiving, of course it will. You were trained to earn your place through self-neglect. But slowly, these unimpressive choices pile up into a different story. A quiet knowing that maybe you were never meant to be a project to fix, just a person worth tending to. And once you start treating yourself that way, the kind of love you're willing to accept from others begins to change too. Redefining enough as something you don't have to chase. If love is no longer an audition, then what is enough now? For so long it was a scoreboard. Grades, looks, productivity, emotional labor, perfection. All these tiny currencies you paid just to feel briefly chosen. You studied harder, you dressed better, you over-explained your feelings. You stayed up at night rehearsing the perfect text, like belonging was something you could finally buy if you just didn't mess up this time. It's not just about school or work, it's the way you learn to scan every room. Am I doing enough? Giving enough? Smiling enough? You became the person who remembers birthdays, who forgives quickly, who listens in the silence while no one really asks how you feel. Being alone didn't hurt the most. Feeling like you had to constantly earn your spot did. And every time someone left anyway, it felt like proof that the math still wasn't adding up. But what if enough was never meant to be a prize at the end of all that effort? What if it's a baseline, not a finish line? A quiet floor you never fall below, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how badly a night goes, no matter who stays or leaves. You start from enough. You don't climb to it. You can fail a class, gain weight, lose a job, have a messy week where you barely function, and your worth does not move even a millimeter. The hardest part is letting this be more than a pretty sentence you save on your phone. Letting it seep into how you rest, how you talk to yourself, what you tolerate when someone's love keeps hurting you. It's one thing to say, I know I'm enough. It's another to close your laptop when you're tired instead of when you're empty, even if the old voice says you're lazy. It's another to walk away from a date who makes you feel wrong for needing reassurance, even when you're scared you'll be lonely again. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do well, to grow, to glow up. That doesn't make you shallow, it just means you care. But now the question shifts. Are you chasing these things to decorate a worth you already have, or to finally feel like you deserve to be here? Can you loosen your grip on constant comparison, noticing when scrolling leaves you more anxious than inspired, and gently put the phone down instead of spiraling about how everyone else seems chosen? You won't hold this new definition perfectly. Some days you'll believe you're enough. Other days you'll forget and go back to old equations, counting every flaw. That doesn't make you a failure, it just means you're human, practicing. Forgetting doesn't erase the truth any more than a cloudy night erases the moon. It only hides it for a while. So what if, just for today, you tried an experiment? What if you moved through your day as if you didn't have to earn the right to be here at all? As if love, rest, and simple existence were allowed, even before you prove anything. Letting the story be incomplete and still worth telling, so maybe that's the quiet invitation. What if this is already a story, even if you don't know the ending yet? Not a draft you're rushing through so you can finally write, I used to feel this way, but not anymore, and close the book. Just this page, this night, this version of you who still isn't sure. I know how strong that craving is for a clean ending, the fantasy where you point to a date on the calendar and say, that was the last time I felt not enough. After that, I never doubted again. You want the before and after picture, the glow up, the proof that all the hurt was worth it. Who wouldn't? The hardest part is realizing life rarely lines up like that. What scares me most is how much pressure we put on ourselves to turn pain into a polished narrative. To turn every heartbreak into a lesson, every lonely night into a triumphant caption. We start treating healing like a performance review. Did you grow enough? Did you forgive enough? Did you stop choosing the wrong people fast enough? And if you still feel shaky, you assume you must be doing it wrong. But most real stories don't end with a single breakthrough. They move in loops. You let someone go, and months later, their name still stings. You promise you'll never chase conditional love again. Then catch yourself checking your phone in the silence, hoping they'll finally choose you. That doesn't make you a failure, it just means you're human, revisiting old rooms with a little more light each time. Research says even when someone finally feels accepted by one person, the old anxiety doesn't vanish overnight. It softens slowly. You might still compare yourself online, still feel lonely at night, still wonder if something is wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with that. Healing doesn't erase your history, it changes your relationship to it. So what if you honored your story as it is right now? Unfinished, imperfect, still unfolding. What if you didn't wait for the impressive conclusion before you decided it mattered? You start by telling the truth about where you actually are, not where you think you should be by now. A simple practice. Write or speak a version of your story that doesn't rush to redemption. Let it linger in the middle. I'm someone who tried everything to be enough, and tonight I still feel alone. I still miss people who didn't stay. I'm learning boundaries, and I still break them sometimes. Say it out loud, gently, like you're reading a friend's journal, not a crime report. Because it's not just about how the story ends. It's about how kindly you hold yourself while you're still in the thick of it. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still hope moving quietly under all this. And in the next breath, we can talk about how to keep choosing yourself, even while the ending is unwritten. If it was never enough, maybe you were asking the wrong question. Because it's not just about how the story ends, it's about how kindly you hold yourself while you're still in the thick of it. As long as you haven't gone numb, there is still hope moving quietly under all this. And maybe this is where we have to pause and ask something you've never been allowed to ask out loud. When you whisper, "I tried everything, and it still wasn't enough." Enough for who? Enough for what? Enough according to which invisible measuring stick that no one ever actually showed you, they just punished you against. You keep replaying the moments you begged, improved, forgave, stayed up at night studying their moods like exams. But who decided the exam? Who decided the passing score? Was I enough? Sounds like a reasonable question, but listen to the way it already assumes there was a test. A judge, a finish line you were supposed to cross with perfect timing, perfect body, perfect emotional regulation, perfect forgiveness. You grew up in a world where love was conditional regard. Be easy, be impressive, be useful, be quiet, and maybe you'll be chosen. That doesn't make you dramatic. It just means you learn to survive by turning yourself into a performance. The hardest part is noticing that this whole framework was inherited, not chosen. A parent who only softened when you achieved. A partner who only stayed when you shrank your needs. A culture that claps for productivity and polish, then goes silent when you're simply hurt and honest. You didn't wake up one day and decide to treat love like an exam. It was the only map you were handed. So what scares me most for both of us is that the real shift isn't trying one more strategy to finally be enough. It's daring to ask entirely different questions. Not, was I enough for them? But, did I deserve better than how they treated me? Not, what was wrong with me? But, what did I need that nobody ever bothered to learn? Not, how do I make them stay? But, how can I be on my own side now, even if they never come back? Can you feel how the ground moves a little when you ask those? It's not just about passing an invisible exam anymore. It becomes about building a life that feels more honest from the inside, even if it looks less perfect from the outside. A life where you're allowed to be lonely sometimes, without deciding you're unlovable. A life where you're allowed to rest without thinking you failed. Of course, it's disorienting to drop the old question. It can feel like losing the only map you've ever known, even if that map always led you back to self-blame. Who are you if you're not constantly fixing yourself to keep people from leaving? Who are you if love is something you deserve by existing, not something you earn by bleeding? Maybe the point was never to finally become enough for them. Maybe the quiet miracle ahead is slowly, tenderly becoming someone you don't abandon anymore. And if that's true, then the real question for the next part isn't, will I ever be chosen? But something softer and much more dangerous to the old story. What happens if this time I choose me first? When I tried everything becomes I am still worth loving. What happens if this time you choose you first? Not as a slogan, but as a quiet, daily decision. Not as a performance, but as a way you move through your own life when the night gets heavy and the silence starts telling you old stories about being unchosen. We've walked through so much together here. The seasons where you were exhausted from fixing yourself. The years you spent chasing conditional love, turning grades and looks and productivity into proof that you were worth staying for. The attachment wounds that taught you love was something you could lose at any moment. The comparison that made it feel like everyone else was being chosen while you sat alone with a phone that would not light up. You start to see how all of it fed the same ache. If I try hard enough, maybe I'll finally be enough. The hardest part is naming the grief underneath that sentence. The grief of realizing that no amount of effort ever earned the love you were missing. Not as a child, not in those half relationships, not with the person you would have given everything to. They did not stay because you suffered more or healed faster or glowed up harder. Their love or their leaving was never a report card on your soul. It was about their capacity, their story, their limits. That was never your fault. So what now? If I tried everything doesn't buy you love, what is left? This is where enough has to become something smaller and somehow braver. Enough is not a finished product. It's not just about being healed, productive, impressive, or endlessly understanding. Enough is you, on a random Tuesday, breathing, making yourself breakfast, answering one honest text, letting yourself cry without calling it dramatic. There's nothing wrong with wanting more growth, more peace, more love. But your worth cannot live on the other side of your progress. What scares me most, for both of us, is how easy it is to understand this and still live like it is not true. So here is one small practice. Once a day when you hear, "I tried everything" in your head, add 4 words to the end. I tried everything I could with what I knew then. That doesn't make you a failure. It just means you were human, doing your best inside old instructions. And then, one small act of choosing you. Maybe it's going to bed on time instead of waiting for their message. Maybe it's eating dinner at the table instead of over the sink. Maybe it's writing down one thing you did right today, even if no one saw it. As long as you haven't given up on yourself, your story is not finished. You are still worth loving, even here, even tired, even unsure. If you want to keep practicing this, you don't have to do it alone. Stay close. Rewatch when you forget. Share this with the part of you that still feels wrong. Let this corner of the internet be one of the places that reminds you you were already enough before you ever tried to prove it.